Look at that.
Back off.
Number one.
Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Clerk Boudreaux, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Present.
Mayor Brown,
Present.
Councilmember Fellows,
Present.
Councilmember Tucson,
Present.
Councilmember Simmons,
Here.
Councilmember McLean,
Here.
Councilmember King,
Present.
all accounted for. We have a
Thank-
quorum.
Thank you so much. We're going to give everybody a moment to center, focus, prepare. All right, I'll entertain a motion for agenda approval.
Move to approve the agenda. Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, supported by Councilmember Tucson, and I believe also King. I heard both voices. Any updates or changes to the agenda? Councilmember King.
I would like to move presentation B to the next meeting.
Presentation B.
Okay. Are they unable to be with us?
Correct.
Okay. Any other,
Mayor Brown, if I may, we just have an update
yes.
to item E under resolutions, resolution 2025-032. The amount has changed a little. It is $42,360, and you all have the updated proposal in front of you.
Thank you. And I do have the updated resolution. I believe I gave that to Councilmember Tucson, and that is correct in the packet. All right, thank you. Any other updates or changes? Seeing none, all in favor of the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. This is our opportunity for public comment. Members of the audience will have 3 minutes to address council. It's for a total of 45 minutes. We'll start with those who are signed up, then move to hands in the audience, and then any individuals who may be on Zoom. All right. So I have Raven Calvin? I'm sorry. I know I always mess that up. Good evening.
Evening, Raven Kelfan, Ward 1. I wanted to express my support for resolution 33 and 34. And I just wanted to remind council of some numbers. So 40,000 people in our county are on Medicaid. 24% of people in IPSI are on Medicaid, and 70% are on Medicare. So it's in total 30% of the population of Ypsilanti is on some kind of government healthcare plan, and there's 7% of people uninsured. And so, as we all know, this current administration has been threatening week after week to cut Medicaid, to cut Medicare. And if that follows through, that's going to be economically devastating for our city and for the entirety of the state. And there are states in our country that already have statewide, like Medicaid, type plans. So even just putting this, putting support behind something like this would be a big move to stabilize our city and to stabilize our region. And the same thing with 34, given if, medical care is cut, if housing costs escalate, the situation that has been going on like Washington Street and the tensions are just going to get higher and higher to a boiling point, which is not good for business owners, it's not good for homeowners, it's not good for the people who are suffering through homelessness. And as the years have gone by, Medicaid has gotten cut dramatically in general. I believe like 20 million people were cut from Medicaid in the past couple of years. So this has a really direct impact on your constituents' lives, on the lives of people I know. I used to be on Medicaid myself. It's a great program. So if we could have some kind of, something like that in Michigan, in case it is taken away from us, that would be amazing for the citizens of Ypsilanti. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the only person I had signed up. So if there's any members of the audience who would like to address council, please raise your hand. Yeah. And if you could state your name and address for the record, that would be great. Good evening.
My name is Joshua Byers. I've called Ypsilanti home for 33 years. Today I'm here to express my deep concern about the world we live in. Over the past 500 days, I've witnessed a disturbing trend of silence from those in power as They ignore cries for help from people suffering worldwide. We're witnessing a genocide in Palestine, with over 46,700 lives lost, including 1,800 children. Under a 76-year occupation that's been met with censorship and sanctions. Real attacks, despite UN declarations labeling them a violation of international law. Meanwhile, Palestinians struggle to rebuild their homes while seeking refuges in tents. A Republic of Congo, Congolese children are being enslaved and slaughtered for our luxury goods, like coltan and cobalt. The Rwandan army, backed by the US, Britain, and EU, is wreaking havoc on civilians. Who's speaking out for them? We should. Let's return to Africa, where resources are being exploited through local militia groups. Profit. With 30.4 million seeking humanitarian aid. What can we do in Ypsilanti to combat the suffering? We must come together as a community to support those affected and not only prioritize profit. Empathy and understanding rather than leaving anyone behind. I urge you all to join me in demanding change. Let's remember that we're the free people of the world, but are we truly living up to it? Ignoring human suffering for our own gain. Speak out. We can make a difference. Let us rise together and demand justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Are there any other members of the audience who would like to address council? Yes, please come.
KJ Pedri, my business address is 120 North Huron. I am here tonight to express my appreciation that you have been moving forward in support of those being relocated from the Water Street property. And I would also like to express my support for the fact that housing justice is on the agenda tonight. I hope that you will thoroughly discuss and approve the resolutions regarding supporting rent control changes and the adoption of the area media income reform. Your voices are meaningful in moving these changes forward at the state level, and they will have a profound impact here in Ypsi. So I would appreciate you moving this forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience who would like to address council at this time? Clerk, is there anyone on Zoom?
I've got somebody that's just identified here as Samsung.
If you could state your name for the record, please. Good evening.
Unmute your mic, you should be able to speak.
Hello?
Good evening.
Go ahead. Hello? It's not there. Hello? Yeah. I guess it's Amy.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Okay,
No, it's okay.
okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the concern that I want to address tonight or bring to your attention is the problem we have in Ypsilanti as far as methamphetamine contamination in housing. And the city can't do any testing and the health department can't do any testing, but the contaminated property is dangerous for people to be renting. And I was wondering what can be done about that, because it's the tenants don't have no way of knowing if the property is contaminated or not. But if it's deemed safe, we thinking that everything is okay, but yet find out it's contaminated with meth.
Name, please.
What?
What'd you say?
See, this is the West Coast. I don't.
Can you hear us?
Only not seeing
If there's the messaging option, but thank you. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh.
I don't know if they can hear me. Okay. Well, thank you for your comments. If you can hear me. Okay.
I think.
All right.
Kusan?
Hi, sorry, that's my Buddhist name. My name is Diana Gonzalez. I'm a homeowner in Ward 3, 716 Hemphill Street, and I work at 15 Washington Street downtown. And first, I'm really grateful for the Zoom option. I've been recovering from long COVID since Thanksgiving, so this option is really helpful. And I'm also heartened by what the council has done for the community at Water Street. But I'm here to voice my support for resolutions 33, 34, and 35. I'm about to lose my job because of the cuts in federal funding. And like very suddenly, there was a stop work order today. And I have a young adult child who's trans and has special needs. And his father lost his job. He tests lead blood levels for the state, but that's been cut. And a lot of people are going to be affected, already affected by the lack of housing stability and access to healthcare because it's linked to our jobs. I know that Raven was speaking on how other states have Medicaid type healthcare, and I was a beneficiary of that when I was in grad school in Oregon, and I had healthy pregnancies. And I was so grateful for that in Oregon. And it is something that made a huge difference in my life, as well as rent control growing up in New York. There were multiple times when we probably would have been houseless if it were not for rent control. I mean, whole populations of people of color would have been displaced if it was just allowed to be gentrified willy-nilly. And I think for the stability of our community, for the sake of just being humane and human, and I would love to see the passing of these resolutions and the support on a city-wide level as well as statewide. Thank you for ceding my time.
Thank you. Are there other hands that want to address council?
Kiddis?
Hi, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, Mayor and City Council. My name is Kadus. I'm a Ward 3 resident. I also wanted to recognize the conversation you all had last meeting about just doing right by the folks in Water Street 2 meetings ago. It seemed like there wasn't a clear sense of how many people were affected, what resources were available within the city and housing trust, what was available with partners, what was possible with county and other community members. And since that meeting, it seemed like a lot of work was done in the background in quantifying the problem, meeting with different partners. Some people had resolutions ready. It was really wonderful to see y'all's collaboration in that conversation. So I wanted to recognize that and encourage you to keep it going. We see you and we appreciate that. Of course, if we had a second opportunity for public comment, I would have given this feedback in the last meeting, but I won't belabor that point. That's something I've raised in public comment in the past. I also want to express my support for resolutions 33, 34, and 35. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there additional hands?
No more hands.
There are no other hands. We will move to close public comment. Mr. Tucson?
Also, I don't know where the city is at selecting a police chief. I don't know if you started the process or not, but when Kurt Moore came to the city of Ypsilanti, he was asked what was his great achievement while he was here. And he said that he would hope that when he leave, we wouldn't have to go outside to find a chief. And now he's gone and he made a suggestion as to who should act in his behalf. So I don't think that we need to go outside to find a police chief. Because when you go outside to find one, he's got to learn the city. He's got to learn to accept the people got to learn to accept him. And a lot of times that don't happen. We know that in the past it has not happened. And we can very well hire from within. We did that so many times. Ed Charisno, he did it. Herb Gildoff, he did it. They were the city managers. We had Herbert Smith, he was hired from within. Jimmy Moore, he was hired from within. L.J. McCowan, he was hired from within. Matt Hochberger, he was hired from within. George Bazar, he was hired from within. Amy Walker was hired from within. We only had two that went outside. That was Jaguski and Stupinski. And I think we don't have money. We always say we don't have money. It costs money to go out searching for a police department, a police chief. But if you got somebody already in the city that can handle the city, somebody that already know the people, it don't make no sense to go outside. Because watch what has happened when you go outside. You have police chiefs, they come here, stay a couple years, and they mess your department up, and then they go on about their business. You have police chiefs come here and stay 15 minutes, and they gone. So I'm asking that you all do not go outside looking for a police chief. The city manager has the ultimate responsibility of selecting a police chief, and he do not have to go outside to find no police chief. It has not happened in the past. It don't have to happen now.
Thank you. If there are no other hands. All right, I will close public comment. Okay. So we are going to move into our presentations. The first being Ipsy Solar.
Solar Ipsy.
Yeah, it says Ipsy Solar on here.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Dave Strensky, and this is John Weiss. And he's the one who's actually spurred me back into action. And we're going to give another go at this, trying to find funding to put solar on 100 low-income homes. I had some slides there. this project is to put solar on 100 low-income homes. And one of my visions is to be able to walk down a street, actually any street, and to just see, solar on multiple roofs on a street side. Next slide, if you want to just advance. Okay. Back up a little bit. IPSI is killing it with solar power. So we have currently 1.7 megawatts of power. Actually, the number's a little bit higher. There's still about a dozen solar installations that I know of that I've tried to contact the owners, but I haven't heard back on putting them on the map. If we do the math with our current population, we're about 90 watts per capita. Environment America makes this list called Shining Cities. And if we were to put Ypsilanti on that map, on that list, we'd be at 21 or 22 in the nation. So we're right up there with with the Seattles and Austin, Texas, and stuff like that. And our fire department is 100% solar powered. At least that's how it was when I designed the system. There were some issues last summer. We got them all resolved. DPW has a giant DPS, has a giant system on their roof. I'm in the process. There were some issues with that one too, but we're getting those corrected, and those should be all resolved quickly. We still have 840 kilowatts out in our cemetery, which is a big array, and the cemetery is taking advantage by leasing its land. So we're doing a great job. Stop and we can move on. This off. So actually, one of the public comments was about affordability, keeping people in the houses, and that's one actually goal of this project is if we can put solar on a person's house, particularly somebody who's lower income, who has struggles with bills. A 5 kilowatt system would roughly put $50 in that household's pocket every month for the next 30 years. So that's $50 that they're not paying to DTE. That's $50 that, that they can keep. They're generating power off their roof, and it's going and it's supplying their house. And so I think that's the best thing. So we're going to take a bunch of houses and we're going to lower their utility costs, and hopefully that'll help them stay in their houses. And some other statistics are, the vast majority of solar, if you hear DTE, they go on and on about how there's just these big solar friends, but they want to build these giant 40-acre, 100-acre farms, and they want to own it. And so really the citizens don't take advantage of it. They take the advantage of it. And so the idea here is to put solar where it's needed. The homeowner, gets the advantage of the solar. And in fact, it's a much better design because we're not transmitting power across utility lines, because I'm going to make power on my roof and it's going to power my toaster. And if I don't need it, it's going to go across the street. It literally won't go more than like 100 feet to the next house, because electricity wants to go to the closest ground. So if I can't use that electricity, my neighbor's going to use it. So it's not putting any strain on the utility grid, and it's way better than these giant solar arrays. And actually, I read a statistic that we lose 8% of our electricity just in transmission. So if we put all this solar on people's houses, there's zero transmission loss. So we're going to make 8% free electricity because there's no losses. So that's the motivation. Yeah, and the next slide, page down. Yeah, so the plan is simple. We're going to find a bucket of money, and John's in charge of that. And then we're going to put out bids, and we're going to hire contractors. And contractors are going to, the winning contractor is going to do their normal job, right? So right now, a contractor knocks on somebody's door, says, would you like solar? Give me your electric bill. Let me look at your roof. I do the math. Okay, it'll cost you so many dollars. But in this case, the contractor does the same process, but now the cost is $0 to the homeowner. So that's the goal here. So the city won't be burdened with a with a lot of labor. Basically, they're just going to manage the money coming in, hiring the contractor, and then the contractors will be doing the bulk of the work to do this. And then as they install the solar, they'll get paid, like, you know, after every 20 houses, they'll get some bucket of money. We'll require them to hire a couple of local people to help with the installations, do training and jobs. And we actually have a track record of this. So we put solar on when they redid the Park Ridge community. They built that Amos Washington Meeting House. I forget what it's called. But we put 20 kilowatts on there, and we actually hired 4 people from that neighborhood, trained them in the building. It was hilarious. And then they ran up on the roof of the building and put the solar on the roof. And then we hired another 4. And when we did the DPS job, and out of these 8 people, 3 of them got jobs, full-time jobs afterwards. One was a journeyman electrician, one was a solar installer, and one was a roofer. So that's the goal here too, is we would require the contractors to just hire a couple of local people, give them a little training, and maybe they'll get a job, you know, a career in solar installations. Another hurdle to putting solar on low-income houses is, me as a homeowner, if I want to put solar on my house, I have to come up with an upfront cost. And it could be like $15,000. So I have to pay a contractor $15,000 to do this. And then there's the Grace Sweeney rebate, so I'll get $2,000 back from that. And then I do my taxes and I'll get a third back from the feds. But that's all money that I had to front. And a low-income person doesn't have that money to front. And then the other thing is I pay taxes. I make money and I pay taxes so I can take advantage of any kind of a tax credit. If I'm a low-income person and I'm not making a lot of money, I'm not paying a lot of taxes. So this tax credit is not as valuable to them. And what's interesting is the neighborhoods that we are targeting, the typical tax credit is 30%, but in depressed areas, the tax credit is actually 40%. So what we're going to do is when we hire the contractors, we're going to require them to, quote, own the system. So they'll have title to the system. It'll be installed on the person's house. But by having the contractor own it, they can collect the tax credit on it. And then we can pass kind of like the tax credit on through to the homeowner, or basically make our bucket of money bigger by monetizing this tax credit through a, I forget what it's called, but through the contractors monetizing the tax credit. All right, so that's how it's going to work. And then we're going to do all this, and then we're going to just keep going until we run out of money, and then we're done. We'll have a party. Next slide. So we're targeting, there's kind of 2 neighborhoods, and I was actually looking at this map when I made this slide, and I think there's 100% overlap, so it really doesn't matter. But Ypsilanti has what's called a neighborhood enterprise zone, which is a zone that, you know, they're trying to encourage development into. And then there's also this federal opportunity zone, and there's also with the IRA tax bill credit. Yeah, there's like a solar incentivized zone or something like that, but they're all more or less the same group of houses. So that's the targets. So I've actually done all this math, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. So I have all these addresses. I've done the intersection of the 2 zones. It's like 1,000 addresses, and then we filtered it on owner occupied, and that brought it down to like 250. And then I took those 250 addresses and I ran them through a program that rated their houses on solar exposure. You know, who's got sunshine and who's in the shade. And so I have a list of 250 people roughly, or houses, sorted by solar exposure. And so that's our target list. So however much money we have, we're going to give this list to the contractor and say, start at the top and work your way down. They'll knock on doors. If somebody doesn't want it, I'm not going to force it. They don't want it. If someone has a bad roof, we're going to budget 10 grand per house. So we might put on some roofs because I don't want to put solar on a bad roof. These are all things we're going to have to figure out. And we're going to look at their electric bill. So if they only need 3 kilowatts of power, then we're only going to put 3 kilowatts on it. If they need 5 or 6, you know, this all is going to, we're just going to try and satisfy as many houses as we can with the amount of money we have. Next slide. SC grant or opportunity out there. It's due on the 20th. I started working on it already. I'm asking for your permission to work with your staff to, to submit a proposal. And I'm working on, I hope to have a draft by the end of this week. Next slide. About his efforts in fundraising.
You. Hello, John.
Mayor and council and staff. Yeah, if you have any questions, I'm sure the question always is, how are you going to raise the money? So I'll just give you the real brief overview. It'll be a mixture of municipal, foundation and private dollars. As Dave mentioned, the city is holding the Grace Sweeney money. That's somewhere between $50,000 and $60,000. We've been having conversations with the county. We're presenting before the Environmental Council. We're hoping the county might be able to come up with some money. The Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Environment and Michigan Solar for All has programs. We're talking to some pretty high level people at the state, and we're really hopeful we're going to be able to get probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $300,000 if the federal government doesn't take away all the money first. And then we have a number of private foundations that have already been targeted. A number of them have contributed to Rutherford Pool, where we successfully raised $2 million for both the bathhouse and the pool rebuild. So private foundations, somewhere between $250,000 and $350,000. And then corporate, individual, and crowdfunding for another $50,000. So we're trying to raise $2 million, $2.5 million, because you always want to try to raise more than you actually need. And real hopeful that we're able to raise $500,000, which would allow us to initiate the project. Because of the scale, we really need to have at least 50 homes ready to go. So we can start with as few as 50. Our target is 100. If we raise more money, then maybe we can, do 125, 150 homes.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Questions from council, Councilmember McLean.
Just, I had one
Oh,
more
yeah,
point is that this is going to benefit everybody in the city. At least I believe this is. So imagine ripples in a pond, right? So if today a contractor has to go to Detroit, do a job, go to Grand Rapids, do a job, go to Lansing, go do a job. They're talking to, multiple different municipalities, multiple different inspectors, building departments. So the idea here, and I think it's kind of unique. I haven't seen anybody else do it. If we could get 100 jobs in, a 6-block radius, that contractor is going to love us, right? They're going to deal with one municipality, one inspector, and I'm envisioning a shipping container parked on the street, filled with solar panels, and crews just like Mr. Roof. You're just going down the street. And if I am hung up here because I don't have this bolt, I'm going to pull the permit for this one, or I'm getting the inspection for this one. I'm going to go to lunch and I'm going to come right back. So this is going to give us big economics of scale. So I'm really hoping that this project will get the price of solar installations down under $2 a watt. And so what that means now is this is our little, where the rock drops in the pond. But now anybody outside the zone who's not going to get free solar, they're going to say, well, if you're doing it for $1.50 a watt, I'll do it, and I'll use my own money. And so I'm really hopeful that that's why I want 200 or 100. I want to make a big splash, and I want to have rings outside of it say, hey, I'll jump in at that price. And I want another 50 jobs to come in with people using their own money. Economics of scale get bigger, prices keep dropping, and it just keeps growing. So that's the plan.
Thank you. Councilmember
Questions?
McLean.
Thank you both. This sounds fantastic. And I have no questions about the funding because I have full confidence in you, John.
Oh, yeah, John is on the job.
But I do have a question about the marketing up front. So people come to people's doors all the time. Some of them are legit, some of them are not legit. How are you going to convince them that you're offering them in effect something for nothing?
Yep.
But you're legit. But how do you convince them of that?
It'll be tough. I'll admit that. I have a little bit of credibility because I've put in solar on St. James Church, which is in that neighborhood, and I put solar on Metropolitan Memorial Baptist Church, and we've done it on Park Ridge. And so I have some friends down there. I'm friends with some pastors and some deacons, And so I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping, people on city council in your wards and maybe Lois Richardson, who's in that neighborhood. I'm hoping that we can get some of these people to go with us and knock on doors.
Mayor Brown, you're first on our list.
No problem. I'm right in the opportunity zone. So yeah.
and try and help encourage. And I think, in fact, I was talking to John the other day is, the first thing I want to do is I want to get the congregation list of the churches I've done and cross-reference it to this list and say, hey, Pastor, can you call this person and say, Dave's all right.
That's a good plan. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. And certainly if there's something that we can do, I hope we can help provide third-party validation as well.
Oh, the one fear I have is I hope nobody in that neighborhood who's listening gets too excited because nothing happens until we find the money. so
I like your attitude.
hold on, hold on until we find the money.
You have one more question? Yeah, sure.
One final question. Thank you, Mayor. So as you talked about $50 as kind of a target level of savings for people per month. As people, for example, say they get 50% of their electricity from the solar installation, does that translate into 50% reduction in their DTE bill as well? I mean, is it?
Yeah, well, the idea
proportional that way, 75%.
So
75% reduction.
Typically what we do in the city is a thing called net metering. And so when a contractor wants to do a job on a house, they look at their electric bill and they look at how much electricity they've used over the last year. They divide it by 365 and then you get an average electrical usage per day. And that number's 20 kilowatt hours per day. That's a typical, you're going to use more in the summer if you got air conditioning, more in the winter if you have heating, but that's 20 kilowatts is the average Michigan home electrical usage per day. Michigan gets what's called 4 hours of peak sun. So the sun's moving, it's low in the winter, high in the summer, but you can pretend that the sun's parked right over your panels facing south 4 hours a day. I take my 20 kilowatt hours, I got 4 hours to capture energy, I need 5 kilowatts of panels on my roof, and I should be 100% solar powered. I'll overproduce during the sunny days, I'll overproduce during the summer, I'll underproduce in the winter, but at the end of the year, I should have generated as much power as I needed. And now, anytime I have excess power, I push it out to the grid. DTE will give me half credit on that. And it actually gets impossibly complicated because now we have time of use usage. So it's not only when you push, it's not only what you push out, but when you push it out. But on a sunny day, you could be pushing out power at the peak price for that power. So you can actually be making more money on the power that you push out. But in general, I'm waving my hands here. At the end of the year, they should have generated as much power as they consumed, and their utility bill should be more or less the connection fee, which is like $10 or $15.
Nice.
Instead of $60 to $100.
You have another question?
Keep going.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Or we can have coffee if you want.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I'll ask is then, so that suggests that battery and the storage capacity of the system is such that you can use it over time.
No batteries. We're doing no batteries. This is all grid tied power. So there's no local storage. If I make power, I'm going to use it. If I have too much, I'm going to push it out to my grid and power John's toaster.
How do you deal with peak time then?
It doesn't matter. Again, I just, it flows in and out. And with this new peak time metering, when it flows out, it gets a different price. Batteries would add.
I'll follow up.
Bank it, it's on your bill.
Yeah, you get credit.
Then you can use it later when you don't accumulate as much. So we put solar on my garage, so I'm saving about $60 a month.
It's not the electricity that's stored, it's in effect, the credit.
Yeah.
Doesn't like people to put batteries on their homes.
Of course not.
They want to buy it at half of the rate that they sell it back to.
We can talk weeds on solar.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon.
Thank you very much. I've had this conversation with you guys before. The February 20th date, I'm looking at the MPSC and there's
March 20th.
March 20th is
when the
proposals are
proposals
due.
due.
Okay.
Okay, not February.
Wanna
I
make
was
sure it
gonna say
wasn't
February
tomorrow.
20th is
So-
like in 2 days.
I hope
So
we'll give you a draft by the end of the
procedurally,
week.
we need to authorize the city to be a fiduciary in this. And then for you to be able to get the proposal. So we'd have to do that at the beginning of March to be able to, at the first meeting in March to make that work.
All right. Councilmember Simmons?
Another solar person?
Yes, I am. Good to see y'all. So just a couple of questions and clarifications, just from some of the things that I heard. So one, so when you were talking about the lack of transmission loss and this electricity push to your neighbors, like how would that, I'm thinking about how that happens, and I know I'm just trying to not confuse myself with knowing what's happening in Ann Arbor with their sustainable energy utility, which part of that is where you kind of have where the houses are kind of connected in different ways to share power. But that's not what this is. That's not really what you're talking
Correct.
about.
They want to make what's called like a microgrid, and they want to have, so right now, net metering, you have to install solar behind a meter. So I can't put solar in this lot, push it into the grid, and then take it over here and power my house. So with net metering, and this is why DTE can't do anything about this. They can't stop this program because net metering is already a law, and this is how we do it today. So with solar and net metering, the power is connected to a meter, and that's its connection point to DTE. What Ann Arbor is doing is they're trying to make a collective of houses and not have each house connected to DTE, but have one giant connection point to DTE so that they can get more value out of their power by sharing it amongst the houses.
Mhm.
That's what's different between here and there.
So, but this would be that somehow, like, if my electricity would go to my neighbors just because we're close. I just wanted to try to.
At that point there, so if John's my neighbor and I'm making solar, it's a sunny day, electricity comes, solar power comes in and it starts powering my devices. You want to think of electricity as water in pipes. So you have a breaker panel and you have all these wires coming in. You have this big fat cable coming in from DTE. It's the middle of the night. There's no sun, and all of my appliances are being powered by DTE. Your meter is spinning forward and quickly. Now the sun comes up, it's going to make this parabolic curve. So in the morning, 8 o'clock, you're going to make this little trickle of power. It's enough to wake up the inverter, make a little trickle of power. So now I got power coming from two different sources. I got this fat pipe coming from DTE and this skinny pipe coming from my solar. And maybe my toaster is 100% solar powered, but my washer and my dryer and my oven isn't. And as the sun rises every day, I'm going to make more and more power. And so as I make more power, I'm buying less and less power. And there's going to be a point in the day where I'm now making everything I need. And then the sun gets a little higher, and now I got an extra handful of power coming into my breaker panel, and it has no place to go. Electricity wants to go to a ground. And so it's going to just naturally flow like water in pipes out of your breaker panel through your meter. If you had one of those old-fashioned platter meters, I've actually seen it happen. Spins, it slows down, stops, and then starts spinning backwards. Now it's all digital, so it's not as much fun. But yeah, so then it goes through your meter, and then it's going to go hit the power pole. And if you have another house connected to the same transformer, it won't even hit the transformer. It'll go to the front of the transformer and go right to the neighbor's house. If there's not another house, it'll go to the transformer, it'll get kicked up, it'll go down the street, and then to that house.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
As opposed to coming all the way from Monroe.
As opposed to coming from Monroe.
Yes.
And John could hate solar, despise it, but he doesn't know because he's just buying electrons.
He doesn't know that he's
getting
benefiting from locally created power. Okay, no, thank you. That's helpful. And then oh, that's good. And then another question I have. So John, when you were talking about some of the funding, you mentioned the money that's still left in the Grace Sweeney Fund. And so I just wanted to ask about that in part because I wasn't sure whether you were suggesting that this project would kind of try to reuse that for this purpose.
So right now, the Grace Sweeney Fund is giving $2,000 per house for anybody who does solar in the city. I think there's roughly $60,000 in there right now. So we could use it in the purest sense of, put $2,000 for each, the first, 20 houses we do. But it'd just be easier to just take all that money, put it in the pool and spread it across all the houses we do.
So the only thing I would say is a concern is because obviously this project is very targeted in space,
Uh-huh.
and understanding like there's a lot of people who've moved into the South that aren't necessarily the residents that are low income. And some of us live in other parts of the city. And so the one concern, the reason why I was like, oh, well, especially if, to your point, which is if there's a contractor that actually helps to push the prices down, that might make it more realistic. It's not my money, it's still the bank's money, right? And so anyways, that would be the one thing that I would just say, which is,
So we're following the rules because it's Grace's money is basically first come, first serve. If anybody wants that money, install solar now. You got like all summer before we're probably going to get in action, so they can.
oh, but it will be before you get it to under $2 per watt. Do you know what I was paying? Let's not talk about it. So anyway, I was just mentioning that, right?
And
Because
we'll
if
have to
it's
make
like
sure
the
that
hope
anybody
is to
who's in the
spread
queue.
to some other spaces, yeah, that's why.
With fundraising, it would be really important for the city to have some skin in the game. So we understand that money might go away if 25 homes, cash in on the rebate before we start this initiative.
Right.
However, if they don't, and I know it's been going really slowly, if we can say the city's position to have this money for the first 25 or 30 homes, that's really going to help our fundraising process. So, that's what we want to.
No, I understand. I mean, it is still expensive, right? Like my array was still like what is my loan? Like $35,000 or something, right? Like it was still so
Batteries, right?
I did also add that, yes. So I know DTE doesn't like me, but it was still expensive even before that. So anyway, I just want to put that so I know it's going slowly, but part of it is because it's still really expensive to do. So okay, and then the other question is around for the contractors. So it sounded like you would have like kind of one major company. Would that be something that would be bid out somehow, or how would that?
I'm still kind of toying with this. I want to give a lot of jobs to one contractor because then that gives them the economics of scale. But so we would have a bidding, an RFP process, and we'd collect bids from 3 or more contractors and select one. We could kind of chunk it up and say, you get 50, if you do a really good job, you get the next 50. If not, we're going to give it to the other guy, or maybe have 2 contractors going at the same time. So we're still got to figure out those kind of details.
Well,
Yeah, and even what they're.
Working with the city as a fiduciary, you have to follow whatever you legislate or whatever rules exist in terms of.
Yeah. And making sure that they have the capacity for that flow, which, yeah.
So that would really be something we would rely on the cities. We want to provide the human resources to make it easy on the city to be a partner, but there's.
So we're at 1.7 megawatts. If we did 5 kilowatts on 100 houses, that would be another half a megawatt of power to the city.
The map that you guys have here. And it seems like my neighborhood falls right in there. So if any of you guys need any more help, any like boots on the ground, just give me a call. I'll walk around the neighborhood.
All right.
Absolutely, give me a call. Absolutely.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yeah, thank you for this information. The presentation is very helpful. I think one thing I'm still trying to understand is what you're requesting from the city at this point as far as next steps. So, how are we
We're requesting
assisting
the
you
city to submit this grant proposal.
to submit the grant proposal? So basically just allowing you to collaborate with staff. That's at this point.
It will require some staff effort to
Mhm.
review the proposal if we win to manage this money.
Yeah. Well, that probably needs to happen by motion, correct? Is that what?
We can
So
bring
Mayor Pro-
that as a resolution.
Yeah, we're gonna
next
bring it for the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Simmons?
Yes, I guess, so quick question just to that point, which is for staff, so city manager, in terms of thinking about this grant, and the managing it. I know this has been a challenge for other things where we've had grants come through or opportunities. So where would this sit and how do we see this kind of playing with other grant opportunities that the city might also be going for to support some other projects?
The city is not applying for this specific grant, but there is always a question of capacity. And, you know, our staff is stretched thin as it is. And if we had the capacity to actually monitor this grant and do the reporting and do the RFP process, manage contractor. So there is always a capacity issue.
The goal is I would try and do as much as that for you.
Thank you.
I know we went through this with the pool also, and I won't say that there wasn't any, you know, burden put on city staff, but really, you know, we were able to manage it in such a way that I think we were able to take a lot of the burden off the city, and you know, that's what we're committing to doing. I think we both have a pretty strong
Track record.
volunteer track record.
Yes.
Unless I win the lotto. I'm outta here.
Don't you dare.
Okay.
Further questions from council? Councilmember King?
Just a quick question. This would target homes and not businesses, correct?
Correct. Again, I would target the homes, but there is a possibility that we run out of homes and then we could target anybody we wanted to.
So
I was trying to steer away from renters just because of their perspective was you would have to deal with the homeowner or the property owner, and there would be no guarantee that they would pass, you know, any savings on to the rentee. Or it would be more difficult, let's just say. So maybe churches or,
Oh, yeah. Renters pay their own electricity tip.
yeah, but the solar would be owned by the homeowner, property owner. And so that would get kind of weird for them to, I don't know how it would happen. We can figure it out, but let's make it simple.
I don't know.
Owner occupied, then maybe we move on to churches and then maybe businesses. Well, let's stick with owner occupied to start with.
Additional questions? Forward to helping you all. Thank you. Okay, Peach Stick was moved to the next meeting. So we have the HDC, and
If I may, I'm
clerk,
sorry.
sorry.
Ellen Thackeray was planning to be here, but had something come up, so we're just submitting it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. All right. All right. So DPW facilities update, Director Wessler. Yeah.
Is the air on or the heat?
Are you hot or cold?
It's cold.
I don't think anything's on right now.
You're afraid of it? Yeah.
I don't think anything's on right now. I don't hear anything.
And we'll get some heat.
Unless you really
Some
want.
solar on City Hall.
Do you want me to?
All right. Good evening.
Good evening, council. How are you this evening?
Good. Yeah.
So we're here tonight to give you a quick update on the status of facilities overall, as well specifically as what's going on with the DPW yard, as a number of you have asked for updates. We have with us tonight also OHM, who is available to answer many questions. So we have Kent Early, we have Rachel Jackson, and we have Harvey, I've forgotten your last name? Schwager. Thank you very much. And they're all working together on this project with us, as well as a number of other lovely projects. All right, next slide. Do you trust me with the power of the remote?
It doesn't work.
Okay, that's fair. So the answer is no. All right, as you will, well, tonight we're going to talk quickly about the goals and the overall status. Then we're going to go over the facilities and challenges. Then we're going to go through the current status of the programming as well as our options. Next slide, please. So as I'm sure that you recall, our fiscal year 2024-25 goals included quite a bit of emphasis on capital improvements and the revitalization of city-owned facility and spaces. That includes City Hall, that includes DPW, Police Department, and Fire Department, more or less in that order, as well as infrastructure and investment, because we can really only serve our community if we are capable of performing the activities that we need to, perform. Just to refresh you, the goals that you recently adopted at the beginning of this year go towards the 25-26 budget. And our progress overall, this is sort of the meat of it. So for the DPW yard specifically, we've completed the phase 1 and the title search. We've also completed a boundary survey, I believe. We completed the building assessments of the salt barn, the maintenance garage. We've done some significant internal rearrangement in order to empty out that portion of the maintenance garage and to minimize use of the salt barn. We're using some off-site storage currently. We've completed a limited phase 2 on indoor air quality in a couple of the buildings that are currently in use. We've received a proposal for some ventilation updates as a result of those. That proposal's been approved and we will be moving forward with the work recommended there. We're going a little bit above and beyond the EPA. I'm sorry, not the EPA, but the OSHA standards in order to ensure the safety, the ongoing long-term safety of our workers. We have signed a contract with Summit, the contractor that was awarded the bid to do the demolition work as well as the stabilization work. Our pre-construction meeting is scheduled for next week. And we are working on the programming study currently, and we're going to be asking you guys a little bit of guidance tonight. So OHM is going to be going into more detail on that programming study and the results thereof and where we're at with that right now a little bit later. As far as where we're at with the other facilities, we've completed an energy audit with the 2030 district people on City Hall. I believe our next step is Fire Department and then Park Ridge. And then we've also done a pre-renovation asbestos assessment here at City Hall. We're also cleaning out the basement. I'm not sure how many of you have seen our basement, but it's kind of I like to call it the dining room table of City Hall. So it's kind of where everything gets put. We have, I think, trash trucks full of stuff out of there, and we're currently going through and assessing what records we need to keep and how best to keep them. So we've been in contact with a couple of digitization companies in order to get some sort of scope of what they can do, how much it would cost, as well as some offsite storage companies, because as I've discussed with many of you, the basement is not the greatest place to keep paper documents. How many of you have actually had a tour of the basement? King.
Oh, I have. I'm too cold to raise my hand. I'm
That's
sorry. I'm
completely fair. I've got some hot hands in the bag if you'd like me to.
I need those.
Yep, just give me the sign. In the fire department, we recently had to do a full emergency boiler replacement. I believe that was in December that we did that. That was about 20,000 bucks, but well spent. Everybody needs heat in order to do their job, even the fire department, and of course, Councilmember King. So at DPW, we've been working with a third-party safety consultant company called 360 Safety to help us ensure that our processes are as safe as they can be for our workers, and they ensure OSHA compliance. And so they found a number of ways in which we can improve. We've been going forward with those, but then we've also expanded their scope a wee bit and had them visit City Hall, the police department, and the fire department, and we're working on tackling some of those to-do lists as well. So that's been very useful for everybody. We've completed title searches on some of the other city-owned properties that may come into play as we discuss some of our options. And we've done, or we're rather in the process of doing a phase 1 on one of those other city-owned properties, which we see as potentially a long-term place for off-site storage or DPW yard. So any questions on that wall of text delivered verbally? Next slide, next slide. We have a whole heck of a lot of responsibilities. These range from administering contracts, administering grants, administering OHM, which does actual administration of projects, so we administrate the administrators. We do actual work like trees, roads, traffic, parks, snow removal. We do the day-to-day dam safety and maintenance, so we actually have a trail cam up at Peninsular Park, so we can actually have sort of a photo monitoring of the dam, so it's not just, well, we feel in our heart something is different here with the dam, so let's call in somebody who charges $300 an hour to take a look at it. Well, I know you're not $300 an hour. You together would be $300 an hour. So that way we can be like, no, last February it looked like this too, and it still hasn't fallen down. So that's been good for us. We do a little bit of planning, and of course we do some fleet maintenance stuff. And next slide. We do all of this within our facilities at 14 West Forest. It's 2.5, not quite 2.5 acres. We have a pole barn, a Vactor pad, 2 shipping containers now. The main building, the giant X over it, is the portion of that building that we don't use that is going to be demolished. Building number 8 on that list is our salt barn, which is going to be stabilized. Oh, and I should say that building number 4 is not going to be completely demolished, just the roofs are going to be, and I believe the outer wall of basically the west wall is going to be demolished too. It can't fall down on us if it's been taken down. We have the wash bay, the garage, the administrative office, and various other bits and pieces, but it's a complicated little space. So pros about this facility is it is great to have 2 entrances from 2 streets because that helps us actually receive salt. If we didn't have that and we didn't have sort of the specific layout that we have that enables those big 2-trailer salt trucks to come through and then also get back out after they've deposited salt, it would be very challenging. We're a great location for access to the city overall. Our little bobcats that do snow removal can pop right on the border-to-border trail and get on the streets and get anywhere they need in a reasonable amount of time. Same thing with our mowers. We're also on a separate DTE circuit and water main from the other emergency response facilities like the police department and the fire department. Both of those are on the same circuit. Fun fact, DPW yard is actually on 2 different DTE circuits that are both different from the police department and the fire department. So the cons for our current capacity is, the structural failure issue. The fuel pumps, they do need about $40,000 to $50,000 worth of upgrades to stop intermittently failing in the summer and to move away from handwritten fuel tickets, which lead to a lot of inaccuracy when we're tracking our inventory. There's no standby generator, which is really useful for things like the fuel pumps. Our history of use as an industrial site makes significant redevelopment or even something like grading and paving the site a little bit more complicated than we would like it to be. Humidity and water issues in our storage buildings damage our equipment and just make everything degrade a lot more quicker than it should. The hydrant and utility pole placed in the center of the main maneuvering area makes things very challenging. The salt storage is also located immediately by a storm drain. The drainage there is not great for water quality, shall we say. And there's no safe and convenient storage for our storm drain repair material and other miscellaneous material, like the light poles for a lot of our downtown lights. And we have moved away from carrying non-stock fixtures for our actual luminaires, the bulb and globe assembly. DTE supplies those, which is a new thing and a good thing. I think it's improved our overall reliability, but that was something that we had to make room for in the past. So if we do want to join the year 2025 and move onward into the future, we don't have room currently for a place to locate a propane fueling tank or electric charger. Our service garage as it is can't really safely accommodate needs of electric vehicles. We don't have really a good public-facing space where we can't serve as an emergency response center in most common emergencies. So right now, The fire department is the prime location if there were a citywide emergency. It's a great location for it. If for whatever reason the fire department could not serve as that, then we'd have to look at another facility. And who knows what happens. That's the great thing about emergencies. We can't add any staff due to the space limitations. So our current locker room slash break room slash training room slash kitchen, it's at maximum capacity. We do not have room for any additional lockers. And we can't add any equipment. So if we needed to get a different or additional sweeper for permeable pavement, if we needed to get a brine tank or something like that, we don't have a place to put it. Any background? Let's talk a little bit about what we've asked OHM to do. We've asked them to review the existing services DPW provides and how much space is standard to use for those types of uses, and to provide very high level estimates about how much space we would need in a site doing what we do now, basically. With modern codes, which provide for a lot of fun things, like ventilation, HVAC, room to maneuver, and then take those space estimates and overlay them on the existing site to see what that could look like. Next slide. Oh, you're already on that slide. It's like you're telepathic. So the numbers that they came up with were almost 2,000 square feet for the administration and support, which is, I think, about twice what we have now. Once you factor in building support, which is another 400 square feet, employee facilities, which is another 1,000 square feet. Right now, for that entire building, we have about 1,500 square feet. So for the workshops, which include storm sewer signs, carpentry, building and grounds, and vehicle maintenance, that's almost 8,000 square feet. That's about the footprint of a Walgreens. A wash bay, a little bit more than 1,000 square feet. That way you can actually get around a vehicle that you're washing. Also, you wouldn't be using the wash bay as additional storage space. And then vehicle and equipment storage, 19,000 square feet. And in the overlay that you can see in that, the things that would be unchanged would be the location of the salt barn and the truck port, so H and I. G is where the Vector pad is currently, as well as our dumpster. But A would be on top of where the current historic brick building is. And of course, the maintenance garage would go away as well. Another thing to remember, just to refresh your mind, the top northern 40 feet or so, plus or minus, of the yard should be unbuildable because there is a large drain easement underneath for a 6-foot storm water pipe that conveys out to the Huron River. That was constructed in the 1920s. So we'd prefer not to be on top of it. OHM to talk through a little bit more of the scale draft. So this is, again, boxes placed on the weird shape our yard is. It shows the quantities of space and the approximate scale on the site, but it doesn't necessarily account for every little thing like the electric vehicles or emergency generator, lifts, cranes, all sorts of fun stuff like that. And if you go to the next slide, not that one, but the next one, you see a couple of points called out where we see some pretty. So the west side, we noted that the way that trucks would have to get in, the gravel train style trucks that we use for salts, they're really the only way to receive salt, can't actually deliver salt to the salt barn like this. And the more eastern most red circle, that is a one-way in only. Our pumps are really only accessible for one side, so we would only be able to purchase trucks that have their fuel trunk, fuel caps on their passenger side, or have to go the wrong way, creating conflicts. There's also not a great place for outsiders to come in. So let's pause for a moment here, and I'll actually call OHM to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Schwader?
you know, we've been looking at the site for quite some time, and this is nice to see an update on this. And so, you know, recognizing the constraints of the current fuel pumps and the location of the salt barn, that seems to be dictating a lot of this. This is like, are there other proposals that would repurpose the salt barn that would make this a more flexible site?
I think there are options to well, let me back up a step first of all and explain what all those boxes actually mean and how that works. That's basically what we call a fit plan. It's not a floor plan. But what we basically did was when we met with the the members of the staff, we developed a list of spaces that they said they needed. We quantified those based on what we would call industry benchmarks and industry standards for similar types of facilities. So a typical office, 10 feet by 12 feet, you know, this sort of thing, and quantified those spaces. And those are the boxes that you see in plan. They don't necessarily all relate to each other in any sort of order. Corridors are missing, places like mechanical rooms and, you know, other access is missing, but the total quantified square footage represents that block of space. Okay, so we plopped it on the site, and what you realize obviously is it takes up the majority of the site no matter which way we put it. If we were trying to squish it, the only way to squish it would be to potentially go multi-story on that site, which would make it more expensive. Obviously, we've got to deal with elevators, vertical circulation, additional mechanicals and things like that. So to try to get away from the fuel pumps, to get the fuel pump service, to get the true flow and everything else, basically everything that we looked at doesn't fit. It doesn't really fit on the site no matter what we try to do. So I don't know if I directly answered your question, but no. Some things, you know, then we have to figure out what those priorities actually are. And then go based on the list of these are the things we have to have, these are the things we'd like to have, these are the things that are expendable, and go from there. But I think we're pretty much there with this list that we have right now of things that at least we want, that we think we need. So.
You then, Bonnie, has that discussion begun around, I mean, this doesn't necessarily work in terms of the fuel pumps and the one-way entry point. Have you and your team started looking at, like, are there things that you don't need that are just wants? Are all these things necessities? And so I figured, but I just wanted to hear that out loud. And so what, I know this is a very broad question I'm going to ask, but then what does this mean? Because that doesn't work. This layout doesn't work.
That's what we're here to get your feedback.
Oh, huh. Okay. From the non-engineers. Okay. Councilmember Fellows, I didn't know if you were done, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, what is the, I guess, the total acreage of the 14 West Forest? Just to understand. Oh, it is. Okay. Bigger than I thought. So you need more than 2.4 acres.
Very much so, yes.
Well, I think the challenge, and if you look back at that diagram with the turning radiuses for trucks and how much room it actually takes to maneuver a vehicle in and out of these spaces, that's where the real challenge is. If we were dealing with cars that all had pivoting axles and we could turn them, you know, 90 degrees on a dime,
Crab walking.
maybe crab walking, right?
Yeah.
But when you have salt trains and when you have other things coming through, there's just not enough space for anything to maneuver.
What acreage do you need?
Well, it's going to depend upon the shape of the site, ultimately. So one of the things we benefit from here is having 2 street frontages, so we can go through. If we have a site that has 1 street frontage, we have to be able to loop through. If it's a weird site like a triangle, well, then some portions of that are not going to be usable space. So the answer is, unfortunately, it depends, but I would say probably.
So what we're looking at here, that in order for us to have adequate space for facilities, this would not be the proper location at this point for what we need to move into the future.
Be able to have everything on one site here.
Okay.
Well, there's additional concerns as well, because we have to knock the existing building down in order to create a new building, which means in the interim, you have no facility.
You have nothing.
Nicely, challenges with the existing site,
Yeah.
but there are significant challenges environmentally, you know, to try to regrade that site, bring the utilities and do the other things required to make that all work.
My favorite exercise.
We could all stand up and try it, right?
Yeah, you know, it's really great. Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Some of these things, um, one, I was sitting here trying, and I'm not going to try because I know that y'all have already figured some of this out. I was trying to go through, like in the presentation, in one place it has the different places and square footage, and then in another place it had price per square footage, but they weren't necessarily the same. They didn't actually overlay exactly, right? So I was just trying to get a sense of, based on this, you know, with these different areas and this footprint and these estimate square feet, what that even is cost wise.
All right, let me try to make it simpler. What we have in the boxes along the side of the diagram that you were looking at are what we would say are the net square footages of the spaces, okay? And then, because this isn't an actual building yet, we don't have the corridors actually planned. We don't have the size of the mechanical room actually right.
Yeah, there's more space than even what's
There's
even
more
in this.
space in this building than is actually there. That's what those additional multipliers are that are shown for mechanical space, corridor circulation, upgrades, et cetera. Foot for buildings in this range, based on similar buildings, that would be a gross cost per square foot, okay? So we're talking about all in a total building. They're running anywhere from $400 to $450 a square foot at this point for pre-engineered metal buildings even. And then the costs go higher than that, depending on the level of equipment. How many lifts, how many, you know, do you have fluid distribution systems? Do you have fluid storage tanks? Do you have fire suppression systems, flammable storage? You know, all those other things pile on, pile on, pile on. But you get a sense of where we're going this. So if you take that base number, and again, similar facilities we've done, the most recent one is probably at this point 3 years old that I could point to directly. It was a 50,000 square foot facility, repurposing an existing warehouse, and all in that was 15 million. An existing office warehouse building that they repurposed and reused, but it was a gut and reinstall. So the basic structure was there, but the basic structure isn't where the money is in projects like this. It's all the other things. It's the tool storage, it's the equipment, it's the ventilation systems, it's the carbon monoxide exhaust systems, it's the other things that are required in a modern facility to provide the level of comfort that you need and the level of, you know, appropriate support for your maintenance staff, and to meet OSHA and MyOSHA and everything else.
And then that doesn't, thank you. So that's like kind of to simplify, let's say, let's just start at, maybe we're looking at about 15 million.
Just
That doesn't include any sort of.
That's-
As a floor. No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Like something like as a baseline without, yeah.
Right, but that doesn't knock the existing building down. That doesn't.
Yes, so that's not all the costs. Right, and we already know we're already putting in costs now, even going through the process. So please believe I recognize all these things. Okay.
And
So
to recognize that this is way order of magnitude,
yes,
right? You know,
because it's also now and then, like what happens, there's the move, if you have to move somewhere, there's the cost for that.
and temporaries and everything
Mhm.
else. Yeah, so it's bigger than a bread box, smaller than a house, but that's about as close as I can get without giving you, you know,
Yeah, like
an actual
exactly. Yeah.
building at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know since that project 3 years ago, costs have gone.
Mm-hmm.
Many cases, building materials are doubling again, and now depending on the sanctions and, you know,
Mhm.
everything else, we may wind up with even higher escalation. costs. We can't control any of that, so
Yeah.
so we can't throw
Yeah.
a dart at it and say it's this. because we don't know.
Well, I just wanted to have like a little bit of an idea because my math wasn't mathing. And so that's helpful just to kind of have that like kind of in there. And then I was seeing in some of the pieces where it was talking about the historic building, that the nice red brick building that I walk by often. So that's there. And there was some conversation about whether a part of the building would connect to that building or not, and the upgrades that would be necessary, but that there was something where it was like, yeah, without here's what this looks like if we remove it, but it was unclear like if there would be enough space on the site if it connects to the building or not at all.
So this fit plan already calls for the removal of that building. So we're building over that footprint and expanding it a wee bit.
Right.
So
If- Right,
Go
but
ahead.
if you say we need to keep that building, absolutely. What we're saying is we'll try to fit whatever we can in that building.
I see.
That footprint limits what we can do. We can't attach to that building directly without
Mhm.
upgrading that building.
Mhm.
Which means we would build next to it with a breezeway connector or something like
Mhm.
that. Because of a building code requirement where if we
Mm.
impact that building, we have to bring everything up to code. in that
Yes,
building.
yes.
Okay, and
Uh-huh.
there are issues associated with even that,
Mhm.
you know.
Okay. All right.
Again,
So
we're
then,
evaluating all the different priorities here.
there's that, and then there was the mediation conversation. So I know that we were starting. You said that we've completed phase one piece, and in part. So I was just wondering in the memo it says that there is in fact contamination.
The building that we're currently.
Like,
Okay. Okay, so then so in terms of the actual remediation of the space, then we don't necessarily have a sense of like what that timeline or cost or how widely spread it is across the,
And I do just want to make clear that although there were exceedances for certain standards depending upon the EPA standards, which would be new build and new code, they did not exceed worker health and safety limits. So we are in that, we're definitely closer to the worker health and safety limits than I personally am comfortable with, and the cost to upgrade the ventilation is relatively low. So we are proceeding with ventilation upgrades.
the other question I have is, with the conversation of to tear down the space, the options that we'll be talking about, at least three of those options would require relocation. And so I'm just wondering if there's been more options of places to relocate temporarily than what we saw whenever that was. I don't know. My memory is a little fuzzy. So, uh-huh.
So we have not been keeping that close of an eye on the real estate market.
Thank you.
yeah, more comment in a way, but seems like it's a good time to bring it up. So, I've been doing these individual meetings with Board of Commissioners to talk about permanent shelter in Ypsilanti. So one by one, I've been meeting with folks, and it seems like where a lot of the conversation is landing is to partner together to take a look at all of our public land holdings and look at all services, not just permanent shelter, but DPW, City Hall, every service, and see how we can manage our services in an ecosystem a little bit more. And so I do think this is potentially a good way to try to figure, because it seems like we're kind of like we don't have an option in front of us. It's very obvious at this point. So it's not like this is going to be solved right now. But one pathway could be to have a joint meeting with the Board of Commissioners to kind of discuss the space planning and look at all the city holdings and the county holdings to see where we can rearrange and maybe stick some services here and some over there. And so it's not just like we are, looking at these different service provisions individually, but as a whole ecosystem. So
And
I think that'd be good.
I was gonna say, I think a little more than a year ago, this conversation came up and I don't know if you want to talk about some of the conversations that did happen about that, because we did discuss that.
We've looked at a few options about services internally between City Hall, Police, and Fire. There's really no good answer to that because everybody is at capacity. And that's part of actually why we're doing the facilities condition assessment, to see what buildings are good for what and where they're at structurally. We did engage with Washtenaw County during their facility space planning, I think back in November of 23 or even earlier than that. And so we've been looped into those conversations. There is maybe a little bit of office space, or there was at that point. There's likely nothing really moving forward with their existing facilities. Really have any facilities that we would be able to share. Pepsi schools, they don't have any facilities we'd be able to share. Neither of those parties are really at a point in their space planning where they would be poised.
Certainly the special use is an important factor. Again, I think it would be great to have a joint meeting to discuss these things now, since space planning has been put on hold and will eventually resume at some point for the county. So it's a good time to get our ideas together in a room with others to see, yeah, what new construction we can do, what other, things could be reused. And it'll be much better to do it with all the minds together. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the line of thing that we were on when they were still actively in process with their space plan. We were meeting with them pretty often about some preliminary ideas that they were going to mull over as a body before moving forward. And now with it on pause, we, wait to hear from them about what their decisions are going forward. But yeah, we've been trying to do this a long time, like try to collaborate with them in some way. And in
Seems to
terms
be
of
renewed interest.
yeah. So,
We're always happy to have conversations. We just can't promise results of those conversations.
yeah. Further questions before we move forward on this? Because I see there are more slides. There are more slides. Okay.
No, I warned OHM beforehand that the challenge is not going to be, them letting me speak. It's going to be me letting them get away. So I had to consciously call Harvey up here. So
Okay.
you're dismissed, sir.
All right, thank you. We may want you back though. Don't go too far. All right, thank you.
So you've seen a lot of bad news. We have some choices before you, some options. These are not requiring a resolution. We want to use the terminology of the age, more of a vibe check, I believe. So our sort of the things that we see really as requirements for a DPW site are all of our core functions are on one site with some storage, possibly off-site. We want safe, code-compliant buildings. We want them to be within the city or immediately adjacent because we are required to have a certain response time for things like if, a giant hole opens up in a road or a tree falls across a road or or snow, which never happens here. You see a bunch of square footage on that as well. On the right side of the slide, I really need to start making these bold. I'm sorry, Tracy. To construct new, probably about 2 to 5 years, depending upon the location, depending upon environmental requirements, all sorts of fun things like that, financing. To move, potentially less than a year, but that timeline, of course, varies depending upon how many alterations to the site and or building, if there is a building on that site. So if it's move-in ready, if it's something where we have to do a little bit of alterations, build a building, fun stuff like that. So there's kind of 4 options in classic MBA fashion. We could probably put this on a 2x2 square. But option 1, of course, is to continue with programming on the existing DPW site, to keep all our future current operations of the existing yard and to really pare it down or give up an operation. To continue with the programming on existing DPW site, keep all current operations out of the existing yard, plan for some operations and storage elsewhere. 3, explore options for permanent relocation. Or 4, do nothing, call it quits, divest of the DPW operations. A 4th one is probably not really an option. I haven't looked too much into state law and all of our obligations, but it's not super attractive to me personally. With options 1 and 2 and possibly 3, depending upon the timeline, we must also, as Harvey alluded to, choose to search out a temporary or alternate location from which we would have our operations. Either that or we could accept a higher cost of service and a lower response time if we were to pursue some sort of modified operations. As time goes on, like we've done I have to credit my staff for doing an absolutely remarkable job of keeping things going despite losing a massive amount of square footage. We've definitely been farming out more things to some of the dealers for our vehicles. We've been having to take a longer time to get materials that we've stored off site to pare down our stock. We've gone through, I think, 3 rounds of auctions for, cleaning out our yard and really saying, okay, this is a nice to have. What's the turnaround time on getting a new one? Let's stick it in the auction. But my staff has done an amazing job under very constrained circumstances and very not ideal circumstances dealing with the chaos that is our current storage situation. So I'd really like to give them a shout out, as the youth say, for doing that. But really, we want a little bit of guidance from you. Should we re-enable our Zillow search and alerts for commercial property? What do you want to see us do moving forward?
Guide us on how to move forward. And if we can get to that tonight, great. But this is a lot of information given to you. If you want to maybe ask questions now, and provide us guidance in what information you'll need to help make a decision. And then we can have the guidance, complete guidance step on another meeting.
A tour of anything, please let me know.
Councilmember Simmons, did I see your hand or did I?
You did. I had, well, all right, so a couple of questions. So just one, just based on what you just said, city manager, in terms of when you would want to actually have specific guidance, like what is the timeline? Is there a certain time frame or timeline you would want us to be aiming for?
Nothing specific yet. Something relatively soon. Prices do continue to increase. But if you can provide us some direction in what type of information you would like that we can bring back to you, if not next meeting, then the meeting after that, and we can definitely provide it via email so you've had ample time to review it. But we would like to at least have some type of guidance on which way you would like to move forward. Maybe last meeting in April, first meeting in May.
With these options, so I just want to try to like tease it out just a little bit more. So in this first option, which is so staying at the site and trying to keep everything at that site, which right now it's already, there's some storage happening. So that would still include the off-site storage that's already being planned.
So that has not yet been officially blessed by council. So my preference would be at the very minimum, either option 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
an official blessing of an offsite storage space. I honestly don't think the option 1 is realistic without paring back significantly some DPW operations.
Yeah, so that was one of my questions, was to say like what kind of things would we need to give up, because it's kind of like, it's like, well, this thing has this big truck that is the problem that doesn't turn, so that's the one we cut, kind of how those decisions would be made.
The biggest truck is the salt train, but there is no other suitable site within the city actually for the salt barn to be, that is under current ownership, that is not Water Street.
Mm-hmm.
So even the site that we're currently using for offsite storage, a gravel truck could not get there and get back.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also not a way for us to give up our winter operations.
Mm-hmm.
It would be easier perhaps for us to either give up trees or to give up storm sewers. But there's not.
Wait, why would that be fraught? I just
Both with
for
our
legal or
Right, both with our existing legal agreements, but then also with, there does not exist really a contractor to pick those up in the way that we do it. So for instance, we do emergency response if a tree falls down. I can think of that do that, and they are already contracted to DTE. So for us to do that would also be extraordinarily expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Storm sewers, there's not an emergency response crew out there. There's not somebody that's going to go around and clear off storm drains during big thaws or big rains. There are groups that will come out and, vector out the storm drains and do all maintenance and that sort of stuff. But it is a lot easier to get a contractor to do those routine preventative maintenance tasks than it is to do that sort of immediate emergency response or timely
Mm-hmm.
response.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to, it depends upon what you consider the legal responsibilities of the city, but as Randy's giving me the stink eye, doing that immediate emergency response would become extremely problematic very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And then with thinking about, so with option 2, doing a lot of things there, but then moving some operations and storage elsewhere, which, because I remember we talked about one possible site for storage. Would there be then another one that would be for some operations, and which operations would have to move?
That's a great question. That is something that we would develop over time. In the past, I know that administrative offices have been different from operational offices. That has not functioned very well because that provides a disconnect culturally as well as operationally. So the left hand and the right hand, they do not speak, which leads to issues with execution, and oversight and fun stuff like that. That would not be my preference to separate administration. It's technically possible. That I don't think is a good long-term solution for the overall functionality of the Department of Service to the city. Storage is really the easiest thing to parse off. To parse off.
So just the storage, like moving the storage needs somewhere else would allow for the current yard space to be sufficient.
No, not necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
because then we would have to rearrange the space.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe that the programming, the fit check, if you will, actually included all of the storage that we currently use or would need to have everything on site.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so that even with that, the number two, so even with doing that, that still requires all the, like a lot of the demolition and a lot of those different things that we already talked about.
Yeah, it's a Hail Mary in the first place, and it also includes those transition costs, yes. Hail Mary incorrectly, I'm not a sports person, I understand it's a football term.
We got the right sport.
You use it right. You're good.
All right, further
Appreciate you.
questions from council, or do we feel okay with kind of preparing more questions? Looking at this, that some of the information that I feel like I will need, I don't even think we will have, because it's like the chicken or the egg right now, right? We haven't looked at some of this because you need direction from us. So I definitely need some time to look at these maps and just use my non-engineering brain to help. But I do appreciate the breakdown and just the candidness of where we're at, honestly, and what we have to decide. I mean, I think we knew this, but it's even clearer now. And we're gonna have big things to do no matter what. It's gonna be expensive.
Yes, thank you. I did want to emphasize that this is going to be very expensive no matter what route we go.
So just other areas of questions too. So in a, you know, I think that yeah, so understanding like what kind of things might be able to move that wouldn't create the service disruptions and issues. I think it would be helpful even, you know, for number 3, to understand what options we might have for that. And then I guess the other thing that comes with these things are what our different funding sources could be, what things we need to be considering for that. There was this conversation about phasing, how the phasing could work or not work, how that obviously extends out time and costs in different ways. So I would definitely want to understand a little bit of what that would look like, because I think for both 2 and 3, there's probably some different phasing parts within each of those options. And then that, you know, we talked a lot in this, so a lot of this is saying, here's what we absolutely already know we need. With space, it makes me wonder if within one of these options that there's something else that could happen that would help us. They'll be like, oh, here's what we really would like, or, you know, something that we actually would want, but it doesn't fit and it's not a necessity, but would create other opportunity. I don't know. I know there was some of this conversation around the emergency roles or things like that as one type of thing that like if there's space that allows that there could be that kind of function. So I'm just wondering if there's other kinds of functions like that that might be possible too.
If I could just speak to that emergency operations thing. So there's two pieces to that. One, there is just simply the continuing of DPW operations in case of an emergency, severe weather event, disaster, what have you. But then the other side is to be able to serve as an alternate location of operations for other facilities, be that fire, police, a command center, even some very limited city hall things like finance is a pretty big piece in any disaster. If the disaster goes on, communications obviously is another one. But then to one of the things that I know we've discussed at Sustainability Commission, there's also some very limited resiliency hub sorts of options. Right now, we don't really have a space that we can allow the public into. That could change depending upon future facilities, not within the current 2.4 acres, maybe. But that's pretty far down on the current list of priorities for this.
Councilmember McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick comments. One is, in our course of figuring out where to put something like this, assuming we move it to a different location, my preference would be that we consider as many options as possible, and that means also looking outside the city. My preference, of course, would be to be inside the city for response time, and just because I think city should be in the city. But that was if all things are equal, and they're not equal. And every time we put a parameter on what we can and can't do, the cost goes up. So I think we just don't rule it out, that we look at other places.
It has not been ruled out. It is definitely some place that we've placed, metaphorical and literal, that we've looked at in the past, but there is a trade-off there, as you alluded to, with our operations versus our relationships with our neighbors as well. Because if we do move to a site outside the city, if it is wholly city-owned, then it is going to be tax exempt. So for instance, if we move to a neighbor that really wants to redevelop a certain place and boost their tax income, well, if we move out there, that does not mesh with their long-term plans, and that could challenge our relationships with our neighbors. So.
Madam Mayor, the other thought is that we should start getting some information on bonding and what our bonding capacity is, ASAP.
Information on our bonding capacity, but it's a little dated, so I'll get an updated.
Council. All right, well, seeing none, thank you. There's a lot to think about here.
And I just also want to give you a warning. So the second meeting in March is going to be another data dump, but for roads.
Oh, my favorite. Yeah.
And as council has questions, please forward them to us so we can hopefully get them answered prior to this discussion at that next meeting.
All right, those are our presentations. So we will move into our resolutions, and Councilmember Tucson, you have our first.
Yes, resolution number 2025-028, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the minutes of the February 4th, 2025 City Council meeting be approved, and I so move.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Tucson, supported by Councilmember McLean. Councilmember Simmons.
Yes, there is one thing, in letter J, it said boards and commissions, but the conversation was on the stop the government takeover, resolution. That was it.
Apologize. Anything that is added at the meeting is not going to show up as its own agenda item. It's a problem that I'm having with Civic Clerk that I'm trying to deal with. So anything that you add after something else, that's what it's going to fall under. It's not going to have its own letter. So there was that discussion and then you added those items. That's why it came under and it looks like it's under J, but I'm working on fixing that with Civic.
Oh, thank you.
It's a structural issue.
Thank you. If there is nothing else on the minutes, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember McLean, you have our next resolution 029.
Following residents be reappointed to the City of Ypsilanti boards and commissions as indicated below. And I'll read the names. Mike Arbach to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Matt Dunwoody, Planning Commission, Andrew Fanta, Board of Review, Craig Hoopy, Board of Review, Eric Mohammed, Ypsi Police Advisory Commission, Roberto Wojcik, Andrews, Board of Review. And I so move.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember McLean, supported by Councilmember Tucson. Any discussion or questions?
Comment.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I think Mike, Matt, and Eric are great commissioners, and they have been and have contributed to each of those things. So glad they're being reconsidered.
Agreed. Further comment or questions? I guess what I'll say is, yeah, I agree, that there are some great commissioners here, and I appreciate them being willing to serve and to come back to continue to serve in this capacity for us. If there's nothing further, please call the roll.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, you have 030.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the following resident be appointed to the City of Ypsilanti boards and commissions as indicated below. Evan Sweet for the Huron River Watershed Council, and I so move.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen. I can say this. Supported by Councilmember McLean. All right. So what we've been doing is having those who moved it, if you want to give any comments or share anything.
Sure. So I brought this forward. Our longtime board member Lisa Wozniak is retiring from her service. That leaves us with two vacancies. Evan has been involved with the Watershed Council for a number of years, organizing the with the Parks Commission, organizing the Fall River Day, and has been in contact with Watershed Council for quite some time. So I think he brings that to the table, and we're candidate for this. So.
Thank you. Anything from you, Councilmember McLean, or no?
Well said.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Fellows?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because I'm referring to our great boards and commissions packet that was generated last meeting. It only shows one position for the HRWC, is that
Right,
incorrect?
I corrected that last week.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, so there's two.
Mhm.
And then I did have a question for Evan. I don't know if you want to come up, but, yeah, I know that we appointed you to the Parks and Arts Commission. Have you attended any of those meetings? Okay. For some reason, I was told that you hadn't been to a Parks and Arts meeting, but are you planning to remain on that commission as well? Serve on two commissions? Okay, and that's within your capacity? Okay.
Just to be clear, this is unlike the other commissions for the city, is that it's not administered by the city. This is an outside board with different commitment and time. It's quarterly meetings generally. And as I take it, those meetings are more of an update to the board than from the board in many cases. So, it's not as great a commitment as some of our other commissions.
And I guess I'll just reiterate that Mr. Sweet has been engaged even without being the commissioner, and so I think there's already a commitment that's been shown there.
Yeah, the application was very strong. Who's our other representative for
It's
HRWC?
vacant.
We don't have one.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
vacant.
so there's an opening. Okay. Great.
Several attempts to engage folks over the last
Yeah.
5 years
Mhm.
have wound up with people that were engaged to a certain point. A number of people were ready to go, and then life circumstances changed that. And so we still need another person for that.
If you're interested out there, there's a
I've,
spot.
I've personally interviewed at least 6 people and got them to a point where they were ready to commit, and then things sideways.
Life happens, yes. Further comments or questions? All right, seeing none, please call the roll, clerk.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you. Congratulations. Please serve us well. Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem, you have 031.
Do?
You do.
Yuck.
Yep, that.
That whole thing? All right. Here we go. Resolution
Jump around.
2025-031, approving contract and authorizing notice. Minutes of regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Ypsilanti County, Washington, State of Michigan, held on 18th day of February 2025 at 7:00 p.m. Blah, blah, blah. Whereas it is necessary to acquire and construct certain improvements to the water supply system consisting of the acquisition, construction, and installation of lead service lines, replacement, water meter upgrades, improvements and replacement, and looping and installation of new water mains, together with all necessary appurtenances and attachments thereto to serve the local unit. Whereas DWSRF contract has been prepared between the local unit and the Ypsilanti Community Utilities Authority, and whereby the authority will issue its bonds on behalf of the local unit and provide for financing of the local unit's share of the cost of the acquisition, construction, and installation of the improvements. And whereas this governing body has carefully reviewed the contract and finds that it provides the best means for accomplishing the acquisition, construction of the improvements and for providing the needed services. Now, therefore, sure. Be it resolved that approval of contract effectiveness, the contract is hereby approved, and the mayor and clerk of the local unit are hereby authorized and directed to execute and deliver a contract for and on behalf of the local unit, provided, however, that the contract shall not become effective until the expiration of 45 days after the publication of the attached notice as a display advertisement of at least a quarter page in size in the Washtenaw Legal News, a newspaper of general circulation within the local unit, which manner of publication is deemed by the governing body to be the most effective manner in informing the taxpayers and electors of the local unit of the details of the proposed contract and the rights of the referendum thereunder. Publication of a notice, the clerk is directed to publish the attached notice in the newspaper of a designated as soon as possible after the adoption thereof, and rescission all resolutions and parts of the resolutions in conflict with this resolution are hereby repealed, and I so move.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Support.
Supported by Councilmember King. Hi, Lou.
Good evening, Mayor Brown and members of council. The bond matter before you is a group of 4 water system improvements in the city of Ypsilanti. Council may recall it came to council last fall. It was for the West Warner water main loop, like a supporting resolution. The authority has been successful in securing low interest loans through Eagle, Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. These 4 projects are: 1, the water main loop for West Warner, which will improve water quality, get rid of a dead end water main. We'll also include the partnership with the Harriet Street water system improvements, which is getting out in front of future MDOT improvements, road improvements on Harriet Street from First to Hawkins. It's going to include about 15 lead service line replacements in the city of Ypsilanti. And then the major chunk of the improvements is actually going to be new water meters, everything below 4 inches. The YCA's water system, metering system is quite old. Most of the infrastructure is outdated. We're unable to secure replacement equipment for the readers and so forth. So this is actually bringing the water system kind of into current technologies for reading and metering and so forth. And I have Tom Colas here, our bond attorney, to kind of cover the details of the bond.
Good evening.
Good evening. So as Luke indicated, this project qualifies for financing through the state's drinking water state revolving fund program, which means that low interest loans, basically 2% is the interest rate for this year's program. That's a 20-year repayment financing, and the project also qualifies for 20% principal forgiveness. So once, and the unlike normal bond issues where you get all the proceeds at once and they sit in a construction fund and you construct the project, the state program is you draw down as you're building your project. So you basically, the work gets accomplished, it gets then funded by the state. And so whatever the final dollar amount is determined, 20% of that gets forgiven. So the city through its funds would not have to repay up to 20% of the actual cost of the project cost. So the resolution does authorize the contract. The contract does provide for that financing where the authority is the issuer of the bonds, but ultimately it's going to utilize revenues from the city system to repay that debt service. And it also provides for a full faith and credit pledge of the city to support that. So the authority would take action after the project is bid to authorize the issuance of the bonds. The contract provides for a not to exceed 3.5 million. That would get reduced based upon project bids coming in, hopefully within the current estimate, which is just over 3 million is the current estimate of the project. So again, in that circumstance where you're getting 20% forgiven, that would be $600,000 would be forgiven and not have to be repaid at all once the project is completed. So the contract provides for the authority to go ahead and issue the bonds after bids are received within those parameters, and then execute any type of documentation with the state through their drinking water program. The idea would be bids would come in, I believe, at the end of April. The state would basically grant their order of approval in mid-May, and the actual issue would close in early June. So that's when they could start drawing on the funds and constructing the project. And look, I don't know if you've got a timetable for when construction would start on the project, but
Since there's 4 separate projects, there would be essentially 4 separate dates. For the lead service lines, it'd be different contractors for each project.
happy to answer any questions on repayment, how the structure works on the bonding side of it.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor McLean, I saw you pull the mic.
Talked earlier about bonding capacity for us, and is it fair to guess that this will count against our bonding capacity?
It would, since it's exclusively for the city's improvements, it would, as opposed to some projects where if it's to the treatment plants where those are shared with other, the township and other local units, other communities, this would be exclusively for the city because it is assets within the city exclusively. So yes.
Pieces coming. Yeah, what does that look like?
This project alone, I don't think would create any significant increases. The debt service on the water side for the city looking forward, we're actually 2026. There's a significant drop from the Water Street bonds. So there's definitely a lot of capacity still for bonding on the water side for the city. These are very much needed improvements. It's definitely a great program for the 20% loan forgiveness. Getting the new metering system in will give residents leak detection real time. If there's a leak in their house or they're on vacation or there's something wrong in the middle of the night, it'll give them those text messages, those notifications by email. Right now we use the Everbridge system for community notifications, but it'll also give customers notifications if YCA would be performing some type of emergency work. So it'll give them another portal to communicate with YCA that can be, I'll say, identified spatially. So when we're going to work on a specific street, we can identify those users that will be impacted by potential valve closures and so forth. So it's definitely improves the communication system with the residents. For for the residents that would be affected by the West Warner water main loop. That is better water quality. That is, if there is a service interruption on West Warner, it's no longer a dead end loop and they wouldn't be without, they would have another redundant supply of water. So I think many benefits.
Thank you. That's important to share out, I think, for people to hear that. Further questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
When was the last time that Yucca had bonded out for a project for the city?
The last project that I'm familiar with for Dwarf has been quite a while. I think the last project was US 12 M17, which was an open market bond.
And so we recently had some remaining funds on a previous that were used for
Tower, correct. The main difference, and Tom can correct me if, on this one, is because the open market bond, we have to identify that amount ahead of time. So those proceeds were due to some additional engineering work by OHM on the US 12 M17 project. We basically realized those savings and used it for other water system improvements. The Dwarf programs work completely different. You only draw down what you actually spend through the construction project.
Further questions?
And just to close the loop on that, so what ends up happening is at the final end of completion of the project, that's when the total dollar amount's determined and the repayment schedule is based off of that, right? So it does get adjusted as you go on. So if you don't spend the full contingency as anticipated in the contract, it reduces the total borrowing at the end of the day because you're only, again, drawing what you need to complete the project.
Thanks for clarification.
Yep. Thank you. Councilmember Simmons?
Just for clarification, you were talking about, because I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember having this conversation around like with the street and having coordinating with, so that it's not getting kind of torn up and then repaved and then torn up again. So that's still like the plan with this, the thinking about these timelines would allow for that coordination.
Absolutely, that's how Harriet Street will work. Get out in front of the improvements that are going to be done by the city in partnership with MDOT. We'll make those water system improvements, and they'll come back and do the road improvements.
And then you were saying, what was it, East Warner?
West Warner.
West Warner, where's that?
Recreation Park. Actually, it's going to, where the water main loop is going to be connected, we'll actually go through like a path right there at the south side of Recreation Park, at the very dead end of West Warner.
Councilmember Fellows, I saw your hand. Do you still have a question?
Did the township already approve this contract or?
So these are city-only water system improvements, so this only involves the city.
Understood.
Any further questions or comments?
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember Tucson, you have 032.
Yes, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas routine inspections have revealed a number of routine and capital needs in the stairs and pedestrian bridges of the city parks, and whereas the city tasked OHM with a structural inspection of said stairs and pedestrian bridges, and whereas the city's engineer of record, OHM, has submitted a proposal to design said repairs and replacements as well as provide bid assistance. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council accepts the proposal from OHM in the amount of $42,360 for design and bid services for parks and structural repairs, and I so move.
And moved by Councilmember Tucson.
Support.
Supported by Councilmember Simmons. Hello again.
Good evening, council. You have before you a proposal for design and bid assistance to do some pretty extensive repairs to various stairways in the city parks, 2 in Peninsular Park. Actually, what you have in front of you might actually be revised from what was in the online packet because I realized I'd accidentally left off a set of stairs. So in Peninsular Park, we actually have 2 sets of stairs. We have the earthen stairs on the north side of the park adjoining the apartment complexes there. So they're kind of timber frame packed earth, which are a wee bit eroded. We have the stairway down to basically the second half of the portage around the dam to the pier that many people use for fishing. We have in Frog Island, the stairway down to the canoe launch, canoe kayak launch, as well as the wooden stairs from the parking lot and also the bridge, the concrete bridge, which was referenced in the inspection report, which we didn't identify initially as needing additional inspection, but OHM quite correctly identified it as such. The concrete bridge in Frog Island, linking Frog Island to, what is it now? The west end of where 734 Brewing is, basically. And then also the gazebo and dock and tridge and east stairway in Riverside Park, as well as the south steps and landing. So we had initially done a quick inspection with the intent to just replace some decking boards. When we pulled things up, we were like, oh boy, howdy, this might need some more expensive eyes on this. So we did ask OHM to come through and take a quick look. They did take a quick look. They made some recommendations. We need their assistance in order to bid this project out and to identify correctly for the long term what improvements actually do need to be made. So that is what is here before you tonight. Any questions?
Questions from council?
I promise to let OHM speak if you guys choose.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I have a question for Kent. Please. No, I'm just kidding.
Specifically.
I'm just curious about the Penn Park one. I know I've tried those steps going up to the apartment complex. It's not a great thing. The other ones are the ones that go down to the concrete pad, not the ones next to the building, but the ones that go off towards the entrance of the park, correct?
Correct. The ones that are next to the building, we have, we believe, successfully blocked because those were also a wee bit eroded.
And this doesn't pertain to anything regarding the concrete pad at the bottom of that.
No, not at this time. No, it's simply about the stability of the steps themselves. And if I remember, please correct me if I'm wrong, the proposal is actually to sort of overlay those in a minimally invasive fashion so that if a better long-term solution comes about as part of the dam removal, we're not in conflict. So we are aware that there might be a dam removal happening in this area sometime, somehow. But we've already been in communication with Katie and Dan in order to make sure that we're all communicating and aware of each other's.
Thank you for anticipating my next question.
Further questions from council? Councilmember McLean?
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any risk that if we do this work, OHM does the work, and we decide we don't have the funds to bid it out, and so consequently, we don't do it for a while, and then we have to redo this because structures deteriorate further and we need a new scope?
That is always a risk with anything that we look into further, yes. What we would likely do, as we are currently doing with some of the stormwater improvements, is to prioritize and to chip away. So I believe in the March meeting, which I alluded to, we will be bringing forward, depending upon some other conversations, a proposal to chip away at some of our stormwater issues as well. So we would likewise chip away at the parks issues and prioritize them by safety first and go from there.
Thank you. Further questions from council?
Yeah. I see one of the outlets pictured here. Is there anything planned for that or restoration of power in certain areas of the parks?
So power is generally turned off at the parks unless there is an event, and that lets us control some of the maintenance of those outlets. That outlet is off currently and is only turned on when absolutely necessary. I believe that the issue with that one was actually just a cover, and that's about a $5 solution,
Okay.
not including labor.
Funding request is for going towards design.
Design and bid assistance.
And then what is the anticipated cost?
Couple $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So not a this year project.
Understood.
Yeah.
Anything further? Pardon me. All right, seeing none, clerk, would you all please call the roll? Thank you, Bonnie.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
I have a
Yeah.
follow-up question for Director Wessler.
Director Wessler? No, you're fine.
The work on the gazebo, question I've had for a long time is those logs that are on the upstream. This will ornamental. I like that. Will this involve removing those? All right.
For the structural stability. It does provide a little bit of pressure and a little bit of additional issues over time. But when the river is low, say for instance in August or what have you, we do tend to try and get out there and chainsaws with a winch and have a little bit of fun.
Can we participate?
No. Liability issues, workers' comp, you can observe from a very safe distance. And actually that is a point that I do want to make. A lot of times we do this work on overtime when it doesn't, parks work generally on overtime when it doesn't matter, when there's people around. This type of work we do tend to try to do when there are not many people around, because something like a winch, if that cable were to slip, can be very dangerous. So it is important for us to try and do that work when attendance levels are low, as well as the river level, which is why it's difficult to schedule reliably.
Low flow is
Low flow, yeah.
person time, right?
Yep.
Voted on that. That was just a.
That was just bonus.
Curiosity question.
I get
All
extra
right,
credit
thank
for
you.
that, or?
All right, Councilmember Simmons, you have 033.
City of Ypsilanti urging Michigan state representatives to reintroduce Michigan House Bill 4893 for single-payer healthcare in Michigan. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas healthcare is a fundamental right and access to affordable, high-quality care is essential for the well-being of individuals, families, communities, and those in the City of Ypsilanti. And whereas Michigan's current healthcare system, which relies on private insurance providers, has left many residents without adequate coverage, contributing to significant health disparities. Ypsilanti faces particular challenges with the median household income of $41,914 and a poverty rate of 25.5%. These economic barriers contribute to higher rates of chronic illness and lower life expectancy, especially among communities of color. And whereas private insurance often deny claims and raise premiums to maximize profits, leading to financial hardship for patients and families, a single-payer system removes the profit motive, ensuring care is provided based on need, not insurer profits. And whereas a single-payer system guarantees universal coverage, ensuring healthcare access for all residents regardless of income, employment status, or pre-existing conditions. And whereas countries with single-payer systems report better health outcomes, including higher life expectancy and lower infant mortality, due to comprehensive, equitable care that addresses systemic inequities, particularly for poor, disabled, LGBTQIA+, and communities of color, including those in Ypsilanti. And whereas advocates and policymakers could look to efforts like the Massachusetts Campaign for Single-Payer Healthcare for inspiration, which offers a potential blueprint for Michigan to implement a similar system to ensure comprehensive healthcare access for every Michigander. And whereas in the 2018 Democratic gubernatorial primary, Ypsilanti voters strongly supported Abdul El-Sayed, who ran on a Medicare for All platform, receiving 60% of the vote in the city, reflecting widespread local support for systemic healthcare reform. And whereas due to the federal government's failure to deliver nationwide single-payer healthcare, despite broad public support, millions of Americans continue to suffer under a system that treats healthcare as a commodity rather than a basic human right. And whereas Washtenaw County, home to Ypsilanti, previously implemented the Washtenaw Health Plan, a public health care program that successfully provided services to uninsured and low-income residents before the Affordable Care Act, demonstrating the feasibility of local public health care and the potential for such a model to be expanded statewide. And whereas Michigan House Bill 4893 proposes a single-payer healthcare system that would guarantee all Michigan residents access to comprehensive services, eliminate insurance premiums, and reduce administrative costs. And whereas a single-payer system would streamline care, focusing resources on patient needs rather than profits. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Ypsilanti urges the Michigan State Legislature to reintroduce and prioritize Michigan House Bill 4893, establishing a single-payer healthcare system that ensures equitable healthcare access for all residents, including those in Ypsilanti. Be it further resolved that the Ypsilanti clerk send copy of this resolution to Representatives Carrie Ranigans, Jimmy Wilson Jr., Jeff Irwin, Morgan Foreman, and Jason Morgan for their consideration, with members, relevant committees in both legislative chambers, and to Governor Gretchen Whitmer to advocate for single-payer healthcare in Michigan. Be it further resolved that the City of Ypsilanti continues to advocate for policies that prioritize the health and well-being of all Michigan residents and supports the movement for Medicare for All at both the state and national levels, recognizing that systemic change is needed to ensure healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And I so move.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Simmons, supported by Councilmember Fellows. Councilmember Fellows?
Yeah, thank you. So this resolution and the next two resolutions, I brought them together because they're all asking the state legislature for their advocacy. So we could discuss them as kind of a package, and also so the clerk doesn't have to send, can send them all at once. I'm always thinking of you. And it also comes out of a conversation with our congressional representatives. I met with Jimmy Wilson Jr., who both was a co-sponsor of the bill that Carrie Ranigans brought the last session, and also brought forward the area median income bill that we'll talk about in a little bit. So in discussion with him, we talked about what would be supportive of us to do for his work and other congressional representatives. So that is where this is coming from. Also, just that single-payer healthcare, universal healthcare is back in discussion as both, systems that rely on federal support are being challenged. And so thinking about things on a state level is necessary. And also just generally with private health insurance companies, there's been some exposures lately that have brought this question to the forefront. So I think it's rather a good time to talk about it.
Thank you. Further comments? Councilmember McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. These are questions perhaps to the sponsors. How far did the bill get in the last legislative session? It got introduced, but did it get hearings?
And get out of committee.
Not get out of committee. And were there estimated costs for this?
Statewide single-payer plan?
Or the overall costs, not just administering, but providing health care for everybody?
No, I am not sure of those numbers. So I don't have a number for you for that. There have been other states that have been looking into this. Vermont actually voted in single payer in the early 2010s. It did not last there because of some worry about a potential tax increase, but it wasn't, they never made it to actually implementation. So it's hard to know. what it would have been like. Massachusetts is obviously working on this. Minnesota's working on it. New York State. So there's quite a few states that are working on it in a fuller way than we are in Michigan yet. But we have had a program in Washtenaw County. Washtenaw Health Plan was something I utilized before Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, and it operated the same way. It's a little bit different. It's a public option instead of single payer healthcare, but public option is actually kind of a weaker system because there isn't the universal buy-in, and it was functional in this county. So it seems like, if we can do it on this level, we could probably do it on the state level too.
Thank you. You have additional questions?
Just comment. I mean, I'll support the resolution. I'm in all else being equal, support of the concept of single payer. Since the resolution is simply asking for a reintroduction of the bill, I'm sure that the costs would come out if this were to be introduced and have a hearing. They'll be significant.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
I offer a friendly amendment.
What is it?
In the fifth whereas clause, where it says including those in Ypsilanti, it's inconsistent with the wording and the rest of it because we're talking about other countries. So just changing including to like those in Ypsilanti.
Like those in Ypsilanti.
Yeah. And then the other part of it is in forwarding this to representatives, separating out Jeff Irwin as state senator, and then giving the state representatives and then state senator Jeff Irwin.
I accept that friendly amendment. Does that?
Councilmember Simmons, do you?
Yes.
That was it.
So it's been amended. Got that?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Perfect.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I also wanted to add that, when I'm supporting this, I thank you for bringing this forward. I think the point being made is that this should have happened on a national level some time ago, and it didn't. And the Affordable Care Act hit a quagmire for that reason. That it got passed because it could get passed, and it couldn't get this through the federal government at that point. But given the current state of affairs with the federal government taking this up on the state level, truly makes a lot more sense at this point.
Councilmember Simmons?
Yeah, I'm not to go too long in this, but I just wanted to say too that I think that there's different efficiencies and ways that in community, and especially for folks on the lower income bracket, how the current system kind of doesn't work too well. I know we have a situation where every year we sign up, even though we know we make more than to be able to be on Medicaid. Each year, my daughter is denied coverage because they say, well, she might be able to get Medicaid. And then she actually winds up not having coverage for at least a full month, if not 2 months of the year, because it takes that long actually to fix it, because you have to wait. It's just like a whole bureaucratic process that we have to go through each year. And there's apparently nothing that they can do about it, even though we're like, we know she doesn't qualify. So, and I think about, how much time it takes us to just deal with that, knowing that this is happening over and over. So anyway, so I think about some of these things too, in terms of how part of it is actually maybe shifting costs from one parts of the system to actually be more efficient in other parts of the system as well. So that's just one of those fun loopholes that we have to deal with our current healthcare system.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Tucson. Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Councilmember McLean. Councilmember King.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Councilmember Fellows, you have our next resolution 034.
Resolution number 2025-034, resolution of the City of Ypsilanti urging the repeal of the 1988 statewide ban on rent control, MCL 123.411, to advance housing justice. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the Ypsilanti City Council is committed to promoting the economic, cultural, and physical well-being of its residents as granted by the city charter, and whereas the Michigan Home Rule City Act grants municipalities the authority to pass laws and ordinances addressing local concerns, including housing justice, and whereas housing justice is the principle that everyone should have access to safe, affordable housing grounded in the belief that housing is a human right, with a focus on racial equity, upward mobility, health and well-being, stability, and housing justice is achieved through policy change, community engagement, and systemic reform. And whereas 66% of Ypsilanti's population are renters, many of whom are severely affected by the current housing crisis with rising rents and increasing displacement, and whereas renters across Michigan are increasingly cost-burdened, spending more than 30% of their income on housing, while eviction rates and homelessness continue to rise, disproportionately affecting low-income and marginalized communities. And whereas 60% of Ypsilanti households are asset-limited, incomes-constrained, and employed, ALICE, or living in poverty, with over half of Ypsilanti renters being cost-burdened. And whereas municipalities like Ypsilanti with significant percentage of low-income renters face unique challenges that require local control to address housing justice effectively, and whereas municipalities like Ypsilanti must have the tools to create local solutions to housing challenges, including the ability to regulate rent and protect tenants, and whereas the private housing market and local landlords currently control rent increases without any regulation or oversight, and there are no laws limiting how much landlords can raise rents, and whereas MCL 123.411 currently prevents local governments from regulating rent levels, limiting their ability to protect tenants and meet local housing needs, and whereas Washtenaw County State Representative Carrie Ranigans reintroduced HB 4947 in January 2025 to repeal MCL 123.411. And the City Council of Ypsilanti strongly supports this legislative effort. And whereas municipalities like Detroit and Pontiac also face housing challenges, have passed similar resolutions urging the repeal of MCL 123.411 to restore local control over housing policy. And whereas rent control and rent stabilization are important tools for housing justice when combined with other protections and affordable housing initiatives to prevent displacement and ensure the well-being of tenants. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Ypsilanti urges the Michigan State Legislature to repeal MCL 123.411 and supports House Bill 4947 to restore local authority to regulate rent. Be it further resolved that the Michigan Democratic Party should add the repeal of MCL 123.411 to the state party platform and encourage legislators to prioritize its repeal to ensure housing justice for Michigan residents. Be it further resolved that the Ypsilanti City Clerk sends a copy of this resolution to Representatives Carrie Ranigans, Jimmy Wilson Jr., Jeff Irwin, Morgan Foreman, and Jason Morgan for their consideration, the members of the housing committees and other relevant committees in both legislative chambers, and to Governor Gretchen Whitmer to advocate for the repeal of MCL 123.411 to promote housing justice in Michigan. And I so move.
Moved by Councilmember Fellows, supported by Councilmember Simmons. Councilmember Fellows?
Yes, so this resolution is actually a Frankenstein of a resolution that a prior council passed, I think in fall of 2023. So it is quite similar to one that's already been passed. I included a couple lines from a resolution that was added to the Michigan Democratic Party platform that I had wrote, I think, in 2020. So really, it's basically the same request. I did realize that Carrie Ranigans, the representative in a nearby area, reintroduced this bill, and it has a new name. So it's actually, I think it's 4009. So that's one amendment I would make to this instead of what is in here, which is House Bill 4947. What else I was going to say about this?
Thank you.
4009.
4009. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No problem. I saw.
Yes. And what was it? Oh, yeah, simply this just repeals the current preemption, the ban on municipalities being able to make public determinations. So it doesn't enact rent control in Ypsilanti, not even close. It just makes it so municipalities can make those determinations if they so choose. And I do think that any representative of the city with 70% renter households ought to be fighting for this sort of thing. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. So this is why I'm bringing this forward and to push support for the bill that was reintroduced just a few weeks ago.
I guess before I move forward, I'll do the same thing that Mayor Pro Tem asked, is if you all are agreeable to delineating out Senator Irwin from the representative area.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, Councilmember Simmons, are you good
Yes.
with that again?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have some thoughts, but I'll open it up for comments or questions from council. Councilmember McLean? Oh, Mayor Pro Tem first. He referred to you.
Sure. I like this, and I will support this. One issue I have is the last one of the last clauses in terms of the Michigan Democratic Party. I think that's a different purview. That's not within the purview of us as you know, if we're going to do that, then we should send it to every party. If we're not going to send it to every party, then we should take that clause out. And I am perfectly willing to sign a letter of individual council members to that effect to go to the Democratic Party. But I don't think it makes sense in this context.
Is that a friendly for you?
Just to remove that, yeah.
I would be fine dropping that. I mean, that's not that could be done outside of a resolution.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Are you okay with that, Councilmember Simmons?
Have a question, but I will hold it. Yes, that's fine.
That is friendly. Okay. Do you have further questions, Mayor Pro Tem? Or comments?
No, I fully support this.
Okay. Councilmember McLean?
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly appreciate the intention. If the intention is to provide more stable housing and less costly housing, those are things I'd like too. But I will say, I think this is a case, the idea of rent control is where the old adage that the road to hell is paved with good intentions comes into play. I think there's almost unlimited potential here for unintended consequences. Some of those is that it may well remove housing options. I'm old enough, few of us are old enough, not many of us, to have lived in the 1970s and perhaps to remember price controls that President Nixon imposed. And while the hope was that people would pay less for things, what instead they wound up with was empty shelves and producers that couldn't produce things at the cost the price controlled items were set at. I also think that there's worry that price controls or rent controls in this case would result in worse maintenance. I'm worried we wind up with more Arbor Ones in our midst instead of more and cheaper rent. So I think the devil's in the details. As sponsor has rightly said, this is simply telling the state to let us make our own decisions. And God knows I'm a fan of, not a fan of preemption. Though I think my preference would be that we tell the state to let us make our own decisions, and then we decide not to do this. Again, support the intent, but not sure the intent is enough to lead to the intended results. Thanks.
Thank you. Further comments or questions from council? I support this. I think I do have some it's interesting. We're on different sides of it, but I have some similar questions around details and if Representative Reingens and the rest of the committee had talked about some of those details or what they would like to see if this is repealed. Well, not what they would like to see, but what they would encourage communities to look into, since we would have local control, to make sure that you wouldn't see issues with like deferred maintenance or just ignoring the needs of buildings and landlords being able to state, it's because they're not getting the same amount of revenue or X, Y, and Z. And I know that a lot of that would come back to the community, and so we'd be able to set parameters around that. But that is one concern that came up for me because of the situation that we're in with Arbor One. So that came up when I was thinking about this and reading this. But I do support this. I agree that a community with 70% renters, it would, we have to figure out a way to make housing affordable, attainable, and acceptable for our residents. And right now, people are struggling. And how do we best work together to make sure that people are not being pushed out of our community, who want to be here, who deserve to be here, who have been here, whatever, is important to me. So I'm going to support this. Further comment Councilmember Simmons.
Hello. I won't say too much. I'll wait until we're having a real conversation about the possibilities for moving something forward around actually the repeal of rent control. But I do want to say too is just that I don't know that it's possible to have a plan to stop capitalists from capitalisting, like, and I think it definitely is a challenge to say that our current housing market is all profit driven and that isn't working for the majority of people. But that by adding some kind of controls, that then they will continue to do what they already are doing, which is to put actually like not necessarily what they should into the housing stock as it is now. So one of the things I do appreciate about this is to say that rent control or rent stabilization is not something to happen in a vacuum, that it will always require, it's actually likely to need a suite of things in order to help right the current situation, because we have something that all people need being within a market framework, and that simply doesn't work. So, so anyway, more to come around that.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I know you.
No, it's okay.
Councilmember Fellows.
It sounds like there's support for the resolution, and that's great. And thank you all for taking the time to consider this. I also want to just thank, folks in the community that have been doing work around this. The IFC Tenants Union has been supporting residents at Arbor One right now. There's been years and years of work. And just, because Arbor One was invoked, that is a situation in which there is no public determinations of, rent stabilization. This is completely private, which, as a point of advocacy, it's just right now we have a de facto private, determinations of rent. So it's only large landlords that make determinations of increases or decreases or whatever else. So, this would allow just to have, honestly, more competition with that. And with places that have rent stabilization, they have boards. So they have boards with renters and landlords and various people with different interests that negotiate what is fair, what is stable, and what would be sustainable. So it is like a multi accountability kind of system. So it doesn't have to be scary, but so that's my point of advocacy.
Thank you. Any further comments? Or seeing none, please call the roll. Clerk Boudreaux.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
No.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yeah.
I'd like to move to extend the meeting to 11 o'clock.
You're 2 minutes ahead of me. Moved by member, or that. Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, supported by Councilmember Tucson first, actually, to move us to 11 o'clock. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Councilmember King, you have our next resolution.
Resolution number 2025-035, whereas Washtenaw County has been identified as the 8th most economically segregated metropolitan area in the United States, with significant disparities between its western and eastern regions, which directly affect residents in the city of Ypsilanti, that these divisions have resulted in pronounced social economic inequalities within the county and the city, contributing to disparities in access to housing, education, healthcare, and employment. And whereas municipalities with high percentages of low-income renter households like Ypsilanti benefit greatly from accurate tenancy data in order to effectively create housing policies that promote equity and justice. And whereas House Bill number 5336, introduced by Ypsilanti State Representative Jimmy Wilson Jr. in November 2023, address the issue of economic segregation by allowing municipalities to use their local AMI to determine affordable housing eligibility, thus ensuring the housing policies reflect the specific income levels of the area, particularly in municipalities like Ypsilanti, which have a poverty rate of 20% or greater. Now therefore be resolved that the city of Ypsilanti supports the reintroduction of House Bill number 5336 and urges the Michigan State Legislature to pass this reform to help municipalities create more equitable housing policies. Be it further resolved that the Michigan Democratic Party should support these AMI reforms and encourage legislators to adopt measures that advance housing justice throughout Michigan. Be it further resolved that the Ypsilanti City Clerk sends a copy of this resolution to Representatives Carrie Ranigans, Jimmy Wilson Jr., Morgan Foreman, and Jason Morgan, and Senator Jeff Irwin for their consideration. The members of the housing committees and other relevant committees in both legislative chambers, and to Governor Gretchen Whitmer to advocate for adoption of the AMI reform to promote housing justice in Michigan. I so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember King, supported by Councilmember Fellows. Thank you for just inserting that. Appreciate you.
I changed it on the paper too.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. That's proactive. Love it. Councilmember Fellows.
Yeah, this is the last one for advocacy at the state level. And it was actually the clerk that suggested splitting this one in the last resolution into two, which I thought made sense. So that's why it's here like this. And I do want to credit Councilmember King for bringing this issue up because it was the first time I had heard that Jimmy Wilson Jr. had brought this bill to the House. So when I saw him, I was able to ask him about it. So thank you. And so, yeah, we had a conversation and he has yet to reintroduce the bill, but said that he is open and interested in doing that. So this is another opportunity just to show encouragement to do so. And, you know, I guess the thing I want to bring up with regard to the AMI, because we've been talking about this forever, you know, the Housing Affordability and Accessibility Subcommittee suggested an affordability ordinance, which basically delinked the standards of addressing housing affordability based on county AMI, since we are such a deeply segregated, economically segregated county. And so I do think this particular bill would advance housing justice on the basis of addressing disparate impact, meaning seemingly neutral policies that we have, even if it appears fair on the surface, they often disproportionately disadvantage certain groups, often low-income individuals or minority communities, even if it wasn't meant to discriminate. I do think AMI, as it's evaluated now, deeply disparately impacts residents in Ypsilanti. So that is why it's here. Thank you.
Thank you. Further Mayor Pro Tem, I see your hand.
I just want to make a friendly amendment to remove part of the second class resolve, just the Michigan Democratic Party, and leave in and encourage legislators to adopt measures.
I accept that.
Councilmember King, do you accept?
Accept.
Okay. Just the first part of the line, Clerk Boudreaux.
So delete, the Michigan and Democratic Party should support these AMI reforms and
Keep started encourage the result.
So resolved, encourage legislators to adopt. Yep.
I'd also like to, this is a very simple bill and it pertains to city ordinances. It doesn't pertain to state policy. And so the thing that has come up numerous times when we've invoked the CBA, CBO and the CBAs is that, folks that move in, MISTA is got their own set of rules, and their MISTA rules, this doesn't affect them at all. So we can create ordinances that look at our own AMI, but state funding is still going to use the county. So I just want to state that. And we've had that discussion in this room a number of times, and so we can do lots of things, but that doesn't change the MISTA administrates their policies either, which is unfortunate.
Thank you. Councilmember Simmons.
Yeah, and I'll just like add to that, or, I know part of that is also like MISTA's things are also coming from HUD. And so I will say that a number of years ago, before I was on council, just being a, rowdy advocate that I am, I try to reach out, I will say, to our Congresswoman Debbie Dingell's office multiple times around this issue to try to actually get to talk to her about it, to try to find out some information, to name that this is an issue, to put it on her radar, and to get some information back. And other than a couple of times having her staff say, oh, hey, yeah, we'll forward it, I haven't gotten anything back. So I just want to name that because I do think it is a challenge in terms of thinking about how these things interact with these different levels. And so my hope, I don't know, something around this, we might be able to, maybe that would be another thing. I don't know if that's another person to add to send this to, is actually be our Congresswoman, to name that this is something that actually there needs to be support at that level too, because these things do trickle down, right? And so it really just comes down to then the financing that then developers, how they're using that to come up with those numbers. And so that really is an area where there needs to be some changes and decoupling possibilities. So I don't know if that's a friendly to add our Congresswoman on there, or if we should do that separately.
I accept.
I do, that would just add one more separate, yeah. I
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Further discussion.
Right. Councilmember King.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Phillips.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you to our sponsors for this suite of resolutions.
It's a trilogy.
Okay. For the trilogy of resolutions. Councilmember McLean, you have our last resolution.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution 036. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the regional integration of the economy in Michigan and the Great Lakes region brings economic benefits, including manufacturing jobs and lower prices for consumer goods to Michigan, Ontario, and all of the U.S. and Canada. And whereas the system of free trade, which has been developed between the U.S. and Canada, particularly in the last 30 years, has fostered the development of this regional economy, particularly in the area of auto and auto parts manufacturing. And whereas this regionally integrated economy has developed over time based on trust between the governments on both sides of the U.S.-Canada border, that both sides will adhere to the treaty obligations to which they are a party. And whereas mainstream economists all agree that tariffs add costs to the manufacturing process that make it harder to deal in cross-border trade and result in higher costs that are ultimately borne by consumers. And whereas more than 1 million Michigan jobs, including the jobs of Ypsilantians, are at risk if tariffs are imposed on Canada, with millions of other jobs in other American states and Canadian provinces also at risk. And whereas the threat of tariffs alone has already resulted in Canadians buying fewer American products canceling travel to the United States. And whereas the U.S. threat to renege on its U.S., Mexico, Canada, USMCA treaty obligations as negotiated and signed just 6 years ago by the same American president breeds mistrust from a country that has been a friend and a strong ally for more than a century. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the City of Ypsilanti renounces both the specific tariffs as proposed by the current regime in Washington, as well as the use of tariffs as a threat directed at Canada. Be it further resolved that this council reaffirms the friendship between the American and Canadian peoples based upon our shared economic, historic, and cultural connections, and reminds our Canadian brethren that the position of the current regime in Washington does not reflect the position of the City of Ypsilanti, nor does it necessarily reflect the position of countless cities and states across the U.S. Be it further resolved by the City of Ypsilanti that local governments in Southeast Michigan and beyond are encouraged to make their position on tariffs known to governments in Washington and Ottawa. I so move. Support.
Been moved by Councilmember McLean, supported by Councilmember Tuce. Councilmember McLean?
Thank you, Mayor. We have, between the U.S. and Canada, the longest undefended border in the world. We've had no war for over a century, and we've taken that for granted for a long time, but it's a nice thing to be able to take that for granted. And especially since 1965, we've had a period of prolonged and increasing economic integration, particularly in the area of automobiles, automobile manufacturing, and particularly since 1965 with the beginning of the signing of the Auto Pact. Numerous people, including our governor, including the head of Ford Motor Company, have weighed in on the effect of these tariffs. Governor Whitmer has said tariffs, quote, should not be used to punish our closest trade partner, unquote, and also talked about it, quote, damaging supply chains, slowing production lines, and cutting jobs, unquote. Ford CEO Jim Farley recently has talked about tariffs, quote, blowing a hole, unquote, in the U.S. auto industry. And the Trump policy has said that Trump policies may lead to layoffs and are causing chaos within the industry. So there's very real costs, and I've alluded to these already in the body of the resolution, but we should be clear. The cost of these tariffs include jobs, small businesses and large businesses alike, both in the U.S. and Canada, cost to consumers for imported products, including energy, from which we import a lot from Canada, trust between the two countries. We have been each other's reliable partner and ally, including in areas around national security, and this trust has been breached. Cost in terms of purchasing practices. Canadians are now boycotting U.S. products and U.S. vacations. And farm income. While that's not a huge issue here in Ypsilanti, it does touch other parts of Washtenaw County and certainly large parts of our state, with $2.7 billion in ag products exported from Michigan to Canada every year. So this issue of trust to me is a huge one, and it's important. The reason that I think we need to speak out as a city council to hear that it's not all of America that's in favor of treating an ally in this way. Just using the threat of tariffs as a way to get something else. This administration has suggested using it as a means to get Canada to do more on the fentanyl issue, regardless of the fact that less than 1% of the fentanyl comes in through Canada. But really, in the case of Canada, doing this just shows how little the Trump regime understands Canada. And 34% of GDP for Canada is derived from exports. So when we threaten to put tariffs of this magnitude on Canada, this is an existential crisis for Canada. That should go a long way toward explaining why they're booing the national anthem at this point. The American national anthem, that is. 76% of these exports from Canada go to the United States. So clearly we're the biggest recipient of the export products. And 18% of Ontario jobs rely on these exports. So 1 in 5 across our border. And the U.S. buys 60% of Canadian ag exports. So meaning the cost of our groceries are going to go up. So the damage has been done. Canada has already now begun a national dialogue on how to be less reliant on trade with the United States, because even if all of the tariffs that have been threatened don't go through, just the threat of tariffs has been enough of a concern that Canada realizes that we are not a reliable partner as we were once. Some of this damage can maybe be undone, but I suspect that not all of it can be undone, at least not in the short term. So with that in mind, I think it's important that we weigh in occasionally, as I think it was Councilwoman Simmons who brought forward the agenda item last meeting. And occasionally we're going to need to stand up and sort of be recognized and play a role in making our voices heard, even on issues that might be thought of as national issues, because they have a real impact on the people that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions from council? Councilmember Fellows?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. One is, did any workers of a certain industry approach you for support in this regard?
No.
And my other question is there a reason why there's mostly a focus on Canada and not like Mexico or the other places that are being discussed?
I'm a believer in, Madam Chair, I'm a believer in sort of carving out workable issues. And we could have another conversation about China and the appropriateness of tariffs there. We could talk about it in terms of Mexico. The dynamics in each of those places are a little bit different. And the fact that we are right next door to Canada, and that Canada and Ontario and Michigan are so tied, especially in the auto industry. That's the reason that I focused on Canada.
Meant that, most of our auto parts, I think, is produced in Mexico though, so or a significant so I think, Mexico is part of the equation for the Michigan economy as well.
True. That's true.
Thank you. Are there other comments or questions from council?
Um, I don't have strong feelings about this. I mean, I have strong feelings about obviously what's going on in the federal government and current administration. The tariff issue is something I still thinking about because, there's been Obama used tariffs. It's like a tool for economic negotiation. I don't have that much faith in it being used well in this circumstance, but I also just don't know exactly, what all the fallout is going to be or any unexpected outcomes that could be positive. I'm not sure about it. There are other things going on with the federal government. I feel much more sure that I, fully advocate in one direction. So this one I might just sit out on because I just don't feel like I have information. But I am interested in learning more about the issue of tariffs.
So I think we had this before, so just for clarification, you'd either have to vote yes or no unless you have a direct conflict with the resolution.
Well, I did look into that as far as abstentions, and there's a myriad of reasons you can abstain, including just not having enough information, not knowing enough about the issue. No?
To give a yea or a nay vote. Abstaining would only be a conflict.
And for further, correct me if I'm wrong, it's because we adopt Robert's rules as our rules of order, that's what it says there, correct?
So you can only abstain from an affirmative yea or nay vote
if you have making, casting a vote on the issue for council.
What if, someone is just not informed about an issue at all?
And you vote no.
Or you just,
Request to table.
leave the room.
Wait, what happened?
I wasn't.
You not
No, I wasn't. I'm just naming that there's. I'm just trying to name that there's multiple ways to do the same thing.
Yeah, seems to be an imperfection of Robert's rules
it's a
then.
Robert's Rules thing.
You can also proceed with various other motions associated with the vote to delay it, table it, move it to another time for further consideration. So you can certainly do that.
I don't find it necessary in this situation, but good to know.
On this. Seeing none, yeah, please.
Sorry. Councilmember King.
Oh,
It's voting time?
Yes, it's voting time. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay, pass.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
No.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
No.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Boards and liaison for board and commission. I can read board and commission liaison reports. Police Advisory Commission.
Yes, so our next meeting, excuse me, our next meeting will be next Thursday, the 27th at 7 p.m. right here in council chambers. Currently, we're still looking for an individual, Ward 1, to fill our last YPAC seat. So if anybody out there in Ward 1 is willing and ready to serve on this board, please send in your application. I will give you a direct call. That's all we got.
Thank you. HRC.
We meet this Thursday at 6 p.m.
Parks and Arts.
They met on Monday, but I'll have a full report.
A meeting last Monday. I know they spent some time talking about the upcoming Earth Day events. They're looking at doing a series of events that will not only span spaces in the city, but go into, I know, Superior Township, maybe Ypsi Township. So they're trying to plan for a multi-day event, and they spent time trying to figure out how they would actually plan it, like the act of planning. And I actually wasn't able to stay for the full meeting. I had to leave. So, Bonnie, was there anything else? I was only there for the first half of it, but
Thank you. HDC.
Several items were on the agenda. The meeting was last Tuesday, including windows at 46 North Huron, a fence portion, 332 Oak, handrail at 218 North Washington. A significant discussion ultimately postponed. 332 East Cross, which is a new addition on the side of a house. Also a discussion, but no vote. 620 Norris, which is a new build on a vacant lot within a district, an historic district, and 10 South Huron, new deck and railings, also discussion there. And the commission approved the 2 annual reports that we had in our packet.
Thank you. Planning Commission.
Next meeting is tomorrow, which will take up the camping.
Oh, you're right. Okay. ZBA.
Has not met.
Okay. SEMCOG.
SEMCOG, I want to remind people that on the 20th at the Ypsi Township Hall at 1:30 p.m., there will be a public session with SEMCOG. So that's happening. March 7th, there's a legislative roundtable. That's a virtual meeting at 10 a.m. And then on March 14th, there's a first of 3 sessions planned for Main Street revitalization and placemaking. And those usually engage conversations about funding. And so I will be attending that.
Thank you. What?
Oh, what? Yep. I'm like, our February meeting is canceled, so the next one will be in March.
Spring County. I think the next meeting's not till March. So, DDA, we meet on this coming Thursday. Rutherford Pool.
Met last week. It's the off season. They're looking at the budget. They're looking at, partnership with the city. We contribute HR services to them and fiduciary for grants and things like that. They're asking for direct support. They're getting support from the townships. They're asking support from us. And I will bring that as part of our budget discussions. And to that end, I've talked about in the past, they had received money from the sorry, just lost my thread. And that got to be very cumbersome, and they're kind of holding that funding in jeopardy. And that partnership is in question. And so that's where the city could come in and help with that. The county is providing money for swim lessons, and that money from the is also for swim lessons. And so if we could contribute something to that, that would alleviate their problem with the metro parks. That's it.
Thank you. Council proposed business, Councilman Tucson.
Yes, first I would like to give a huge Ward 1 Southside thank you to DPS in their efforts with all the snow removal with these past two storms. When the storm had hit, I was working inside, and by the time I looked up at like 1, 2 o'clock, the roads was clear out there in Ainsworth and all over the south side. So I appreciate that. In this past week, I've had the opportunity to meet with Interim Chief Anderson and talk about some of the things that he sees in the police department, as well as getting a chance to meet our new Sergeant Lane, and got to introduce myself to him and get to know him just a little bit. And I would also like for the community to pay close attention to all the programming and things that are going on at Park Ridge Community Center. Monday nights, they have the basketball and tutoring event for the kids after school. And if I'm not mistaken, this Friday, there is a spades and history program going on down there that I will be in attendance to. So yeah, just pay attention to all the events happening at Park Ridge and all the other places around Ypsi. And that's about it. Stay warm out there.
Go, Councilmember King.
So I will mention again, team building. We have not really discussed that again yet. And that is something that I am definitely interested in doing with the rest of council. I also wanted to bring up back down memory lane that will be happening at Park Ridge on Friday from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. And I also want to have a small discussion, if we can, regarding a comment that came during public comment regarding the chief search. I also met with Chief Anderson. I know he also came to a neighborhood association meeting that I asked them to come to, and they were thrilled because they had not had police presence there in over a year. And I was wondering, even though we did get a little bit of the history in the public comment, have we ever appointed anybody? And being that that is something we talk about a lot, is how much we don't have funding. And searching for a chief will take money and time. So I'm wondering about Chief Anderson. Have we talked to him and asked him if he wanted to step into this position? And if so, can we appoint him?
City council can't appoint department heads. I spoke with Chief Anderson prior to beginning the search. He was uncertain at that time. I encouraged him to apply if he would like to do so. And we're gonna continue the search process. I hope Chief Anderson does apply, but we still should do our due diligence and see what else is available to the city. And the funding will come out of the salary saved by Kirk Moore's departure.
And so my next question would be, in the past, what were the requirements in appointing someone versus doing the search? And again, I understand as a body, it would be your position, but we can make that suggestion if that was something that I put out there, correct?
For the last police chief search, there was an interim that had expressed a want to apply. They determined not to. So we did a police chief search in the past. It has been hired internally in the past. It's also been posted. But I believe it would be a good idea to complete a search and just to see what options are available to the city, and then make the determination once we have all the available information.
Thanks for that information. Again, I have already met with him. I do plan to meet with him again just to see exactly where he stands, and I may bring this back at the next meeting as to see if someone will second it.
This is not something that
Can't-
council can really second in stopping the search.
We can't make a suggestion as council to you.
The position is going to be posted by the 24th. You can make a recommendation that once the names are selected for.
But I'm saying prior
interview.
to that. I'm saying prior to, is that something council can do? That is
Council
what I'm
can-
asking. I'm wondering, in the past, how was chiefs appointed versus us going out to do a search?
So can I jump
Yep.
in? They're never appointed by council. They're always chosen by the city manager.
Correct.
And usually the configuration is like a slate of interviewers that's configured also by the city manager. There have been both internal candidates who have been interviewed and then promoted, chosen. I can't recall exactly. Probably have to dig to see if there were people who were just appointed by a city manager. I don't have that data to share. But ultimately, the purview of how that position is hired is left with our city manager. We can make any recommendation or suggestion we want. But ultimately that process lies in that executive role. The other piece for me, I will say, I want to caution us on the way that we talk about some of this when it's about current personnel. Because some of that, and think about if you may bring it back, you may want to ask if we can go into closed session or something like that, because we should not be publicly kind of discussing active people who work for us if we're going to get into like the weeds of it, if that makes sense. So the topic is fine, but just being mindful of what we're saying and not saying and in the space. I've been here before. I've been here before, and we don't want to go down that road. And much more, but
Okay, well, I definitely want to have further conversation. Thank you.
thank you. Councilmember Fellows?
Yeah, I just want to mention that I was subbed in for the short-term rental committee. Yeah, Councilmember Simmons allowed me to take their spot in that, which I appreciate because it's something I care about a lot. So got to meet with Councilmember McLean, Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon, City Manager. No, I don't think you were there. I think it was Joe Myers, and some folks from the Planning Commission, and it was a good initial meeting. I look forward to seeing where we go with that. And as far as business goes, I mentioned this a couple times before. I'm wondering if tonight we could look at scheduling a work session for community benefits ordinance in June, sometime like early summer. That seems to be, since I've discussed it with various people, a date that could work.
Is that around budget time or not?
The budget will need to be approved by June. It has to be approved before June 6th, and that would be the June 3rd meeting.
So after that. Is that something that council is interested in doing?
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't around budget time because we're
Mhm.
having a bunch of meetings then as it stands. We want to.
So can you look at your calendars? And while you're doing that, I'll just remind everyone here and in the public that we're going to have a work session meeting to discuss all things commission on March 12th. It's coming right up. So get prepared to think about what topics we might want to talk about. And yeah, the public, if you're interested in that, to put that in your calendar, March 12th.
I'll start. A Tuesday is going to be the best for me. So I would be open to meeting on the 10th or the 24th of June. Again, I quite frequently reconfigure my work schedule for our meetings, and Tuesdays I already keep open. So if we could do it Tuesday, that'd be great.
I do say that the 10th is the HDC meeting, so if the 24th works for everyone, I would suggest that date.
I don't know that the 24th actually will work for me. But I can't confirm that yet. So
If needed, I can let the preservationist planner know that they're going to have to relocate on the 10th. They have ample time to do so or reschedule for another day.
I would prefer the 10th.
Tentatively the 10th?
yeah, the 10th would work for me. The 10th would work for me.
Looks like
Since I'm not going to see Kendrick Lamar, probably. I was thinking about it though.
Is that on the 10th?
Yes, it is on the 10th.
Oh, I'm sorry. The 10th is not gonna work for me.
Oh,
It's just not. I can't do that.
it's fine.
Spend my money.
Yeah, 'cause- well, maybe I might go too there.
Yeah, I
don't
mean, then the
know.
10th won't work because coins have been spent. So yeah.
They went, they jumped, you know.
No, I'm very serious. Like I work hard for the money, and
No, I'm just naming. That was one of the things I was looking at that day. So that's why I knew conflict.
yeah, it's a big one.
So,
Um,
but I mean, so I don't know. You said I mean, like,
Invite him here.
I could definitely have him come to city council, maybe.
you go.
You know, I'm kidding.
Hmm.
Okay. What would I could make a Wednesday work if we want to keep it in June?
so that 11th.
Is it possible to just meet at 6 p.m. in one of our existing meetings?
Like on the 17th.
Yeah.
Because the 6th, the 3rd will still be the final budget meeting.
Uh-huh.
So then on the 17th, meet an hour early.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that.
Yeah, because I imagine it could take 2 work sessions.
Yeah, and then we could just do
so-
more than one. Yeah, that would actually be better.
Okay.
Thank y'all. Thank you. Yeah.
So you're taking me in with you, right?
See? Surprise.
I need to know where everybody.
All right.
I'm glad I brought it
Thank
forward.
you, because I was not, my brain does not think about that.
I neither.
Oh, that ain't my business. You know, that's their issue. I love them both. Okay, so the 17th will have an early start. Okay. Do you have anything else? All right. Councilmember Simmons? Yep, that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Just a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to mention, I just wanted to say, I know I saw that the Washtenaw Housing Alliance has an event coming up this Friday, celebrating their Built for Zero 100-day challenge, a community-driven initiative focused on ending veteran homelessness, which I didn't know that they were in the midst of, but I'm happy to know that now. As part of that, they work to expand community partnerships, engage with landlords, reducing number of veterans entering the homeless system through expansion of prevention services and identifying barriers veterans face when seeking housing. And through this challenge, they said that they were able to get 25 veterans experiencing homelessness housed. So I think that's a good win. So just wanted to name that and say congrats and, appreciate knowing about that. Also, just because it's something else that we also have talked about in council, and so I did actually see and read the prosecutor Ellie Savitt released a policy just earlier this year to operationalize drug checking services for the county. And so I plan to forward that along to everyone. So you'll see that in your inbox as soon as I get my typing fingers going to do that. And so I want to let people know about that. And then also wanted to let folks know, and I see he's here in the audience, I met with Jake Phillips, who is interested in the Planning Commission and applied for the Planning Commission position. And one of the things that we were wanting to just check on is the ward, I guess I'll say allocations for that. And so I know he said that he got those from Mayor Pro Tem, and that there are currently 2 members from Ward 3. And so he could be a third. Is there only 1 seat open on the Planning
There's
Commission?
only 1 seat open, and at this point, there's 2 from Ward 1 and 2 from Ward 3, and then all the other positions are filled by Ward 2 people. So it could be from Ward 3 or it could be from Ward 1.
But definitely not Ward 2.
Definitely.
So,
Okay, well, we gotta talk. Okay.
so, Oh, so yeah, so I was just saying that, so that's helpful. So just to know that I'll bring that forward for our next meeting. Okay. That's it. I don't want to give it up, but it is it for now.
Councilmember McLean.
2 items. One, Councilmember Tucson also mentioned it. Just want to thank the snowplow folks, and salt folks. Did a nice job. As always, please pass along our thanks. And I think this is maybe anticipating something that the city manager may be mentioning, but I just want to recognize him and his team for working on the Water Street situation. My understanding is that some significant progress has been made to help the people that were living there. And so I hope that is, I think it was mentioned by a few of the people who made public comments, but I thought we should mention it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you to Councilmember Fellows for mentioning the work session with the members of Planning Commission, and Joe Myers. I thought it was a great start to that conversation. I had the opportunity last night to go to EMU's campus. There was a meeting sponsored by the campus Democratic students and the League of Conservation Voters, and they had invited, there was a panel of 4 people, Representatives Jimmy Wilson and Jason Morgan, a representative from LCV, and a student representative, and the question was, discussion was all around the climate action pre and post inauguration. There were, the obvious movements towards climate action during the last administration that made greater strides than any other administration towards that end. And now we have basically an attempt to gut any actions towards dealing with the situation. And that was brought out by lots of folks. And then the question came, what is the day-to-day impact of people in our community? And I thought it was interesting that every person said, talk to your local officials and things. And so I wasn't on the agenda, but I interjected at that point and gave them a couple points, in fact, in how the change in funding could impact us. So there was talk about, funding in the future and clawbacks of funding that hadn't been distributed. And I brought to the point of two major sources of grants that we had just gotten for dam removal and for Water Street. And if that were to be impacted, that would have a huge impact on the infrastructure in the city. Making that point for local folks, and hopefully that we will see, and also trying to recruit the student body that was there to engage with city council. So that's it.
Thank you. For me this evening, I definitely want to also give thanks to DPS. I actually got to miss the storms, not for a good reason, but I wasn't here for them, so that was cool. But I came back and everything looked great. And then I did want to bring up, oh, I didn't see it on here, but in the packet there was, what? Am I crazy? The communications plan, but it's not on this current form, but it wasn't in the packet, and I did review.
Yeah, it's under my comments, so.
Oh, okay, it's not on here either. So, okay, I didn't know if it was gonna come up or not, but, okay, great. So I'll just stop and let you talk about it. City manager?
Okay, council, as the mayor just brought up, Katie Jones in our community services department has worked diligently on this plan. It's kind of just for you to see right now. We have it at the department level to kind of figure out how each of the departments can work their communication strategies into this plan. And once we have that, I will bring it to council for final approval. Any amendments made will just adjust slightly the department's function as communication. So you can look forward to this coming on a future agenda. This has been a long time coming. And I really appreciate the work of Katie. Water Street, we had 3 intakes from that. We were able to make contact with 2 of the individuals for the storage. One individual did come at the scheduled time, so their things are in the storage. We will coordinate with the other 2 to see if they would like to use our storage until April. We are coordinating with the Washtenaw Shelter Association to make reservations for 2 of the campers. If it seems that it's going to work out this way, they will be picked up tomorrow at 12:30 to be transported. And then we're just gonna work with the Shelter Association as a pass-through. I'd like to also take this moment to thank the Washtenaw Campers Camping Outreach. They assisted in going out to the site and bringing back people that needed services. So it was good to work with them. The PUD agreement will be is scheduled to appear on the March 4th agenda, and that's for Peace Plaza. Our attorneys just finished a review and gave them the notes and their on the report of the of the agreement that was provided to staff. And that is all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Clerk, do you have anything?
No.
I just remembered to, I just try to remember. All right. Well, thank you all so much for a productive meeting. The meeting is adjourned.
Before 11.
Burley, but Burley.